So do we have a quorum, Tom?
We have three of, oh, no, we have four. Yeah, we have a quorum.
Okay. So I have about 2 more minutes.
I have that as well. Roland, you can't, since you're not in the room, you can't see it, but we do have some representatives for the one petition, BZA docket number 21-003.
Okay.
Kufis. Am I pronouncing that right? Yes. Kukla Properties LLC. So when that comes up on the agenda, be aware that there are people here to speak to it.
Great.
Good evening, Roland. How are you, sir?
Good. How about you?
Okay.
Good.
We're getting forward to getting rid of this pandemic soon. It's coming together.
Hopefully soon.
We'll be able to go out again and have a chat in person.
Exactly.
Hello, everyone.
Jonathan, hello, how are you?
Good evening, Jonathan.
How are you?
Hello.
Okay, let's see. I have 6:45, so as chairman of the BZA, I will call this meeting to order. We should all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
With liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tom, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Sharon Mayer,
Here.
Jonathan Peterson,
Here.
Daniel Buxa, here, Roland Raffin,
Here.
and Stuart Friedman.
Present here. Next item on the agenda is the minutes, the approval of the minutes. So do we have any
Mr. Chairman.
questions about the minutes?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second. Or Sharon, you can second.
Call for the vote, Tom? To approve the
Sharon
minutes?
Mayer,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
I was not at the last meeting, so I will abstain.
okay, Daniel Buxa. Yes. Roland Raffin,
Yes.
Stuart Friedman.
Yes. Okay, very good. The minutes are approved of the March 9th meeting. We have an item of new business, BZA docket number 21-003. Would you like Tom to give us a summary of that?
Yes, I would like to do that. This petition is a request for variance. This is a preliminary hearing. Michael J. Kufis and Kukla Properties LLC has applied for a handful of landscaping variances in order to redevelop the property at 1734 45th Street, which is the former Dante's House of Pizza, into an office for his orthodontic practice. I've provided the information in the staff report. The location is here on 45th Street near the corner of 45th and Franlin Parkway. It's identified here in red. And I'll just let you know as a background, this project has been begun. Actually, interior renovations are underway. And you may have noticed that exterior demolition has taken place. There was some wood siding that's been taken off, exposing the brick underneath. There's an entire development plan that's being put together by the applicant and his design team. That's going to be submitted to the Plan Commission for approval at some point in the future. But for the time being, the applicant is requesting a number of variances in order to develop the parking lot and come up with detailed plans for the parking lot. I have provided the plans here, but I'll just let you know that as you're aware, anytime a project is, or a piece of property is redeveloped to the point where interior renovations exceed $100,000, they must meet all standards of the landscaping code for the parking lot. That was a provision that was put into place by the Plan Commission in order to encourage incremental improvement as redevelopment happens throughout town. So while they are providing some landscaping in their parking lot, there are a few items that they are requesting be waived. Those are listed here in the report. There are essentially three things that they need relief from. The first is screening the parking lot from adjacent property. I'll show you in a second on the site plan where that is, but it's on the west side of the parking lot where it borders the Citgo gas station. The second variance is from the provision that interior parking rows shall be terminated at both ends with landscape islands. Again, I'll show you that on the site plan in a second. And then thirdly, there is a provision that says no parking space shall be more than 72 feet from a tree within the lot as measured from the center of the tree to the nearest line demarcating the space. And that standard really goes hand in hand with the one I just described, where you have interior parking rows that have islands that are typically planted with trees. So usually that's taken care of through that. But by asking for that waiver, they're also in need of a variance for the tree requirement. So I just described those requests. I'll just show you the landscaping plan, and this is kind of in the wrong direction. I see that I can try to flip this, but you'll see here, this top image is the existing property. This one on the bottom here shows the enhancements to the parking lot that would be required per our landscaping ordinance. You can see that there's the addition of some parking lot islands here and here. These are landscaped areas, as well as these interior row, this interior row that's terminated on both sides with parking or with landscape islands. So I've highlighted here, these are the two islands for which they're seeking the variance. I'll just show you another image here. This is the landscaping plan that they prepared per the ordinance. So they went ahead and said, this is what it would look like if we complied with the code. But what the variance is requesting is eliminating these two islands in order to make use of 4 additional parking spaces. So you can see each one of those islands is equivalent to 2 spaces. So that being said, then I'll also just point out that this area here is required by our code to have a landscape screen. And then you can see also by eliminating these islands, you have parking spaces that are further than 72 feet from a tree, because the trees are really located only along the 45th Street frontage. So those are the variances. The applicant has provided an explanation for the request. They filled out the conditions of approval sheet, which was provided to you in your staff report. And they've also provided a letter indicating that they've counted the number of spaces that they believe they will need in order to accommodate both their clientele and their employees. And they believe that they would be significantly disadvantaged if they were required to convert those 4 parking spaces into landscape islands. So that's, I won't speak for them. I'll let them come up and discuss their petition with you, but I just wanted to provide that background information for you.
Thank you, Tom. Is there petitioner present to speak on this matter?
Yeah. Use David's podium.
Please identify yourself and your address, and we'll be delighted to hear your request.
Good evening. My name is Mike Kufis. I'm the owner of the property.
I'm just going to go ahead and turn this so they can see you on the screen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. Tom certainly well explained the background behind this. I won't repeat the material I put in the letter, but this particular property has some challenges to it. And if you notice the dotted lines at the extensions left and right on the property, so to speak, neighboring Citgo and neighboring the cardiologist. We actually, about to purchase this property, we had to get a quitclaim deed because the building was currently on the neighboring Citgo property. And so when you look at the dotted line, and you see that actually the building sits on the neighboring property. Has been resolved through a quitclaim deed. However, it also minimizes, again, our opportunity to do some of the things we'd like to do. So the reason we didn't add a screen is because the island next to us that you see there at Citgo is really nothing that is part of our possession. And so again, going back to pure numbers, my orthodontic practice, we have, by the nature of what we do, we have a fairly large staff. And so when I bring all my staff in on a full day, there's going to be 16 parking spaces necessary for my staff. And prior to fulfilling some of the requirements of the ordinance, we were 28 spaces. I've tried to negotiate with the auto repair shop behind me for spaces, and he's unwilling to forego any. The cardiologist has agreed to at least talk to me, but hasn't freely admitted that they're willing to give away spaces, so to speak. So keeping the number of spaces at the maximum that I can is really the reason for the variance. My fear is that in my busier times, I will have parents sitting in idling cars, waiting for a parking space, or perhaps parking in neighbors' properties. The challenges I have before me is that, unfortunately, the previous building owner had aggravated both the cardiologist and the auto repair shop behind me, so neither particularly favorable to me even talking to him about the possibility of using some of the parking spaces. So my motivation is very simple, is that I want to maintain the maximum number of parking spaces available and for my patients and staff. In terms of the landscape requirements, I've lived in town my entire life. I grew up here, I've made my career here. Contributing to the town's desire to make a nicer looking property certainly makes sense to me. You don't buy pretty from ugly is the saying that goes along with orthodontics and run the pretty business. And so I would like it to look like a luxury hotel more than I would a gas station that's next door to me.
Interestingly, I think part of the
Not sure where that came from.
Okay. Is somebody speaking, or do I continue?
No, it's nobody on the board. I'm not sure where that came from.
Okay. In terms of my contributions to the town, if the variance is accepted, I'd certainly be willing to donate those trees to the town for use in other places. That's really my motivation, is really to fulfill the needs of my practice and my staff and patients. I'll certainly entertain any questions.
First, are there any questions by members of the BZA, please?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just want to mention that both of my children have been patients of Dr. Kufis, but in no way would that hinder my decision in this matter. I will say, as a resident and a parent, that Dr. Kufis is an excellent member of this community, not only charitable, but also having his business here for so long. I'm glad to see an empty building that's been sitting here for such a long time being remodeled into a thriving business. That being said, I've also had 2 teen drivers that drive to this parking lot. I don't want to see parking spots lost in this spot because a lot of these kids are teenage high school kids that are be using this spot, and I want to make sure that that parking lot is as safe as possible for not only my kids but other high school kids that are going in there getting their braces on to pull in and out of that lot. So that's my opinion on this matter. I think we can make sure 45th Street is landscaped really nice, because that's what you're mostly going to see driving down that business is seeing 45th Street landscaped down that berm. That's all I have.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes,
I would also like to state that my daughter was also a patient of Dr. Kufis's. So, and I don't believe that that would affect my decision one way or the other either. And also, you know, having been a parent who took her daughter to Dr. Kufis for, I don't even remember how long now, at least a couple of years. And sitting in the office and knowing how much traffic there was in and out, and how much parking would be required, and the number of employees that he mentioned, understand and agree that the need is real. That's all I had.
okay. Who else would like to speak?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm going to make a motion to set this for public hearing.
Is there a second to that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second.
All right, let's call for the vote. Tom?
Okay, Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes,
Daniel Buxa. Yes. Roland Raffin,
Yes.
Stuart Friedman.
Yes. All right, the meeting, the public hearing will be next month, Doctor, and we'll wait to hear what happens then.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, I see here that Tom, BZA 20-012, has the petitioner requested a continuance.
Yeah, this is the same project that we've been looking at for probably about 6 months. GE Distribution Center. To be honest with you, we've looked at it so many times I didn't even draft a new staff report because nothing has changed. Other than that, they're still collecting data. They still haven't quite resolved the problem of stacking of trucks and truck congestion at the GE Appliance Distribution Center over on Superior Avenue. So as I said, because they're still collecting data, it's still working up kinks in their plans. They have requested a continuance to the May meeting.
Okay, so they have requested a continuance because they're continuing to collect data concerning that. Do we need to have a motion, David, for continuance?
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
make a motion to continue the meeting to the May public meeting.
Second to that motion?
I second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, let's call for the vote, Tom.
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes,
Daniel Buxa,
Yes,
Roland Raffin,
Yes.
Stuart Friedman.
Yes. All right, the matter is continued to the next month. Next item on the agenda is ICU Science Solutions LLC, BZA 21-001. I see, according to the staff report, that the petitioner failed to publish notice of the public hearing. Is that correct, Tom?
That is correct.
So then you are recommending that we have a motion to table this or till the month of May as well.
Yeah, it's, we can't really hold a public hearing because it wasn't advertised. So, I'm not sure if it's tabling or simply deferring the public hearing to May. But, the intent of the applicant is to complete the public notice requirements and appear at a public hearing as soon as
All right.
possible, which would be May.
So I will entertain a motion to continue that matter also into the month of May. Who would like to make a
Chairman,
motion?
make a motion to table the public hearing until May.
And do I hear a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that.
Thank you. Call for the vote, Tom?
Sharon Mayer,
Yes,
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes,
Daniel Buxa,
Yes,
Roland Raffin,
Yes,
and Stuart Friedman.
Yes. All right, the next item on the agenda I have here is BZA 21-002, Mr. Guy Costanza. Is there another staff report? This has been before us before, right? Many times.
Yes, this was tabled at the last meeting at the request of the applicant. As of Friday, I wasn't sure whether or not they planned to attend this meeting, but I learned that they would again like the board to table their petition. They are working out some issues with the town. I'll just leave it at that. And so they may be back in May. They may not be. But for the time being, they're requesting that we just defer this preliminary hearing to next month.
Okay, very good. Then I will entertain, is there a motion to table this matter also until the month of May?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a trifecta and move to continue to May.
And do I have here a second to that?
I second that, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we'll call for the vote, Tom?
Sharon Mayer,
yes,
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes,
Daniel Buxa,
Yes,
Roland Raffin,
yes.
Stuart Friedman.
Yes. Well, this has been a pretty smooth meeting. Do we have any other items on the agenda, Tom?
I have no items. I will just report that the Plan Commission at the meeting following your meeting will be taking up some proposed zoning revisions which are being put forth by the staff. Some of these address some of the items that you have dealt with on the variance basis, including fences in side yards and sign types. So we're hoping that some of the things that we've seen over the past year and few months as variance requests will get sort of codified into the zoning ordinance, and we won't have to deal with them at the Board of Zoning Appeals anymore. These are primarily variances that you've approved. So that's just a.
Okay, very good. All right, so what was that? The next business meeting is May 11th at 6:45 p.m. Is there any other items the BZA would like to discuss, or should we entertain a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman,
I'll make a
okay.
Jonathan, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second.
Okay, call for the vote, Tom, on that?
Sharon Mayer,
yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes,
Daniel Buxa,
Yes.
Roland Raffin,
Yes.
Stuart Friedman.
Yes. So we'll adjourn till the next month, and I must comment that this is the most non-controversial meeting of the BZA I've had in years.
Just wait till next month when all the tabled projects come back.
Right.
They're all going to come back at once.
Definitely, yes.
Very good. Have a good
Well,
couple
have
of
a good
weeks.
month and see you next month.
see you next month. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
You're right. And don't forget to get your tax returns in. You've got an extension now automatically. By the break up.
So I'm going to call this meeting of the Munster, Town of Munster Planning Commission to order. Please set your phones And if you're on Zoom, your dogs, your games, everything on mute. And let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Mr. Vanderwood, would call roll, please.
Counselor Mellon,
Present.
Counselor Gardner,
Present.
Counselor Tulowitzki,
Present.
Stuart Friedman,
Present.
Roland Raffin,
Here.
Brian Specht,
Here.
Chairman Baker.
Present. All right, we've got a quorum. Next up is the approval of minutes from March 9th, 2021. Any modifications, changes, motions, what say you?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
There's a
Chairman,
motion
I will second.
Second,
I will second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
pick one, Tom.
Counselor Gardner.
All right, any discussion? Be there none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Be there none, out there forever. Next up, preliminary hearing, be there none, public hearing. PC 20-008 P-Core Corridor, Chicago LLC, et cetera, for GE Appliances Distribution Center at 475 Superior Avenue. States here in my document, the applicant has requested a continuance.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to continue.
There's a motion to continue. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
Second, any discussion? How many times are we going to do this, Tom?
Till the
They,
data comes in.
they've indicated that they're collecting data to present to the Board of Zoning Appeals, hopefully at the next meeting. So once they get through that step, the Planning Commission can take action on the application. So
Mr. Wickland, is there a legal aspect of how many times something like this can be continued?
I don't believe we have anything on the books currently, do we now?
we do not,
So this can get continued and continued as long as we vote for that.
yes.
10-4. All right, so there's any other discussion? There's a motion continue in a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Either none. Next up, PC 20-009 Guy Costanza and GM Contracting, et cetera, for commercial development at 407 and 411 Ridge Road. The applicant is now seeking variances which cannot be granted prior to the meeting. Staff recommends tabling.
Mr. Chairman, based on the items presented in front of the Board of Zoning Appeal, I will make a motion to table this item.
There's a motion to table. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I will second that motion.
And a second. Any discussion? Mr. Vanderwood, we're tabling on staff recommendation.
This is a very similar situation to the previous item on the agenda where they're seeking variances in order to get around certain development standards for the development plan. Until they get those variances, they can't really present their development plan for approval here at the Plan Commission because it doesn't comply with the zoning.
Has this contractor made any effort to change his original plan? That was brought to the board 15 months ago?
There have been some minor changes, yes. There's still a few pretty significant deficiencies.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one question?
Yes, you may.
Tom, regarding the lack of parking, I think 42 spots required. They're requesting 31. This is going to be a high density area. What's the position of the town on limiting those limited spaces for this business?
So that the project already received a variance for the parking on the condition that if it was to be developed as a restaurant, it would be the number of patrons permitted in the inside would be capped in order to meet the minimum parking standards. If it were developed as a retail use, then it would meet all of the minimum parking requirements, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. So basically, he's still trying to find a tenant that meets these requirements then.
Yeah, he's looking for a tenant still, and there's been some discussion between the town and the property owner about really the future use of the property. So there's kind of some other things going on as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Either none. Moving right along. PC 21-002, multiple zoning code text amendments. Mr. Vanderwood, multiple.
This might be where it stops.
Yeah.
So much for the blue.
Some more zooming.
I'm gonna turn this here so you all can see your.
Sorry, commissioners? Oh. Can I see us?
I presented this, a summary of our proposed revisions at the meeting last month in a preliminary hearing. Just very briefly, I'll give a background. Sorry, get settled here. The code, our zoning ordinance was revised pretty substantially and adopted in December 2019. We made a number of changes at the time we made those revisions and they were adopted by the council. We understood the sweeping nature of the change and that there could be some minor things, maybe even some major things that we would revisit after a period of time to determine whether or not, they're on track with what we want to see in the community. So after living with the code for about a year, a little bit more than a year, we have identified a number of revisions. I put together a spreadsheet, which is included with the packet, listing all of the proposed revisions. There's some deletions, some clarifications, some additions, and some just changes. So they number 449. There are 449 revisions that we're proposing here. It's quite a bit to take in at one time. We understand that. So what I'm going to do tonight is just kind of go through them. I've categorized them a little bit. I've got a PowerPoint presentation that I'll go through, and we can hopefully get through most of them, if not all of them tonight.
Okay, hold on for a second. So this is a public hearing, correct, Mr. Wickman? So are you looking this because I see 2-3 folks that are here from a public standpoint to get through this entire thing and then talk, or maybe we can bring them in if they would like to chime in? Is there anybody else on the Zoom from the public, or is it just the 3 folks I'm looking at here in the room?
Let me take a look here.
Because I don't know, after the 342nd change, I don't know if I can remember number 17.
Let me look at the participants here. It looks like there's at least one person here who is not a member of the Plan Commission.
Okay, so everybody from the public, if you'd like to have a comment on something, which please do, just raise your hand and you could address it as we plow through all this stuff to try to make it a little more efficient as it relates to getting through the process. Because this is a lot of fun for everybody. But very important, right, Tom?
Exceedingly important.
There you
yes.
go.
So at this point, I'll just begin this PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
I'm prepared. Okay, I'm going to have to move this around a little bit. I have a feeling the person on the line wants to speak about the fence ordinance revision.
Okay.
So at that time, we'll open up that participant screen. Again, just by way of background, December 2019, we adopted the new code. April 2020, we made the first amendment, which was the landscaping section. July 2020, there were 2 more amendments that were approved, which were permitting changeable copy on gas station monument signs and permitting 6-foot fences in side yards. The process that we've been following is after the replacement of the code, we tracked discrepancies and conflicts. As I said, we presented a summary of the proposed amendments last month. After that preliminary hearing, we revised the amendments based on the comments that we heard, and we published notice of the public hearing in the Times per state law. Tonight, we'll ask for a public hearing with the Plan Commission and a recommendation to the Town Council to approve these amendments, as well as adoption of the findings of fact. And then our plan is to present these to the Town Council on May 3rd. Again, by way of background, this is the zoning map. So I'm going to go through these revisions, and each slide will have a reference to some zoning districts where this was applicable.
This is Steve. Sorry to interrupt. Can you share the presentation also on Zoom? We're not seeing it right now.
Oh, you know what? Let me make sure I've got the right. I'm going to stop the share, then I'm going to reshare because I must not be getting the right screen here. How's that, Steve?
Yep, we got it now. Thank you.
Very good.
So this is the zoning map. And as I was saying, throughout the presentation, I'll make reference to where these amendments are going to have an impact. So which districts they apply in. Generally here, you can, this is the map of the town. You can see the green areas are the civic zone. That's all the property owned by the town, the parks department, the schools, trails, and then also some utility corridors. So if you want to get yourself sort of oriented, this is community park here. This is the town hall here. There are also churches included in that civic zone. All the blue districts are residential districts. So the lighter blue are single family residential, single family and two family. And then the dark blue is multifamily residential. That would be condos and apartment buildings. The orange, yellow, and red are mixed use, which is our old kind of commercial corridors. You can kind of see, if you can see my mouse cursor here, you see this is Calumet Avenue. This is Ridge Road. You know, these are the commercial areas. If anyone has any question about where we are at any time, I can pull up our online zoning map to take a look at. I'm going to share the screen again. So we can kind of go through and look at it in more detail. But again, these are the mixed use districts here, this yellow, this red, and the orange. Purple is planned unit developments. And then gray is manufacturing. So you can see that the majority of the business districts are this CD4, CD5. Are you seeing the PowerPoint now? Or are you still on the
Zoning map.
map? Okay, let me, I don't know how to toggle through these things. Oh, here we go. So generally speaking, the revisions are going to apply either to everything, so single family and mixed use, PUD and manufacturing, or it will apply only to the residential or only to the mixed use commercial areas. So you can kind of lump those together in your mind as we're going through it.
And off we go.
Yeah. One other little bit of background. This is what we'll make reference to some yards. So the front yard is the yard in front of the house. Side yard begins at the end of the front yard and goes to the backyard, and this is the rear yard. All right, so I'm going to first talk about some minor amendments that are essentially just missing elements and clarifications. So things that should have been in the code that got accidentally taken out or made, or just simply not clear. So the first is accessory structures in residential districts. The current code says that in terms of lot coverage, an accessory structure shall not exceed 900 square feet. And the height is limited to 4 stories or 50 feet maximum. This was in error. Okay, we accidentally included a 4-story or 50-foot maximum accessory structure in a single family residential district. That was unintentional. So what we're proposing to do is just clarify the lot coverage provision, saying that the combined area of all accessory structures shall not exceed the lesser of 30% of the rear yard or 900 square feet, and to cap the height of accessory structures at the lesser of 16 feet or the height of the principal building. This would refer to a shed, a garage, so on. So again, those are elements that were in the code in the past. We just accidentally deleted them.
Question?
Are we moving on to another item after this one?
Yeah.
Do you want to, these simple ones, you want us just to make motions and accept them, or how do we want to do this? So we're,
What I prefer is to simply make a single motion and accept all of them.
At the end.
So if you have a question or a challenge, then bring it up while it's on the screen, and then we could either include it, modify it, or delete it. And then at the end, we're gonna do one fell swoop for everything that didn't fall under the previous statement. Moving right along.
Okay, all right, so this is a simple one. There's a section on patio decks. This is just something that was added into the new code, and we don't really know what the terminology is, but it's listed as a permitted encroachment in the front, side, and rear setbacks. So we're proposing to delete the word patio, just make it a deck, and prohibit encroachment into the side yard, and then limit encroachment in the front yard to 5 feet. And what this would do is clarify the meaning of the term and establish consistency between porches and decks. And this is throughout the entire code. So every district.
All right, so let me ask a question. So with the new proposed deck, right, does that mean it has to be above grade, or would that be a stone at grade type of patio scenario?
This would be a deck, an above grade.
So it has to be above grade. So if I'm doing stone, this doesn't apply.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And it doesn't include like front porches.
A front
Or-
porch is a separate thing. And
Okay.
it's, so it's listed separately,
Okay,
and it has that 5-foot maximum encroachment into the front yard.
okay,
And again, when we're talking about the front yard, it's not saying it's limited to 5 feet in depth, but just saying there's a 35-foot setback. You can build your house at 35 feet and then encroach into that setback
gotcha.
5 feet. So theoretically, your porch or your deck could extend to 30 feet.
Okay,
Now, if your house was placed farther back from that 35-foot line, you could have a deeper porch or deck. And again, that's something that's been on the books for a long time. We had no intention to really change that. It just kind of got wrapped up in some of those changes.
I see. All right, thanks for the clarification.
ADA ramps. This is something that was suggested by our chief building inspector. Currently, there's nothing in our code that permits an ADA ramp to encroach into a front yard or a side yard or a rear yard. So we're proposing that we add ADA ramps to the list of permitted encroachments in all setbacks. And the rationale would be simply to promote accessibility to homes and businesses for disabled persons. I mean, this is something that we will see, and we have seen primarily in the front yard where, you know, elderly or disabled people need to put in a ramp. Again, this would apply to all the residential and mixed use districts.
And Mr. Chairman, question.
Yes.
The encroachment, would this still be subject to the 5 feet that you were just talking about on the previous slide, Tom?
No, this would not. There wouldn't be a limit on this.
So the ramp could go,
Theoretically, if it could go to the front of the, to the sidewalk, but what I've seen in the past is they're set at an incline that is, accessible to a wheelchair, and then they land wherever they land from the front door in the front yard.
okay, thank you.
Sure. The next one is off-street parking surface. Again, this is something that we have no regulation for in the CD3, R2, R3, and R4 district. We're proposing that we include the terminology, it shall be graded and surfaced with concrete, asphalt, or other material approved by the town engineer or building official. The reason to include this is the standard is already included in the R1 district. And so this will just establish consistency between residential districts. And it's something that, should be in there anyway. We don't want dirt driveways. So that really deals with driveways and, like parking pads in backyards and things like that.
But they would still have to come to you as it relates to the town if they wanted, if somebody starts parking at an angle in their front, lawn in front of the house.
Right, yeah, I mean, that would not be permitted. You
Okay.
have to park on a,
Even if I put a concrete pad down.
well, if you're, by a very strict reading of our zoning ordinance, you cannot have parking in a front yard of a residential property. So
Thank you.
unless it's a driveway, and the driveway is defined as leading to a garage
Thank you.
or similar, like a carport or whatever. Okay, so yeah, again, that's pretty simple one. The next one deals with corner side yards. Again, this is one where, because of the way our former code was structured, it was applicable in all of the districts, but it was only called out in the R2 district. So when we put it into the new code, we had this definition of exterior side yard lines for corner lots that only got applied to the R2 district. So it just got left out for the R1 and the R3. And so as it says, currently there's no separate standard for corner side yards. What we're proposing is this definition. I won't go through, it's kind of a calculation, and we didn't make it up, it's just what was in the previous code, and it's also in the current code only under the R2 district. I'll note that in the list, the Excel sheet that I provided with the staff report last week, this definition is just messed up. I accidentally copied and pasted two of the same paragraphs twice. So you'll see that it's not quite what you may have read already. But basically what this does is it says on a corner lot, your front setback is standard where your front door is. Your side setback is calculated as a side yard setback unless there are houses that have their front yards on that side of the block. So if you imagine there's a street where every house is at a 35-foot setback, and then you get to the corner and the house has a 10-foot setback. Well, if you're that house next to that corner lot, you now have your front yard facing into somebody's backyard. So what this does is it pulls those houses back to the front yard setback, but then allows them to move a little bit closer, 6 inches for every foot that they're distant from the lot line. So again, it's kind of a convoluted calculation, but it works, and it kind of maintains consistency of setbacks on both sides of a.
Is this for existing lots and existing homes, or is this only for new? Because new shouldn't even have a conversation about this.
Well, this would apply to a new building.
A new building, which is.
This would apply to a new home in a CD, in an R1, R2, or an R3 district, yes.
Mr. Baker, I think this was exactly the last code. Was it, Tom, had to be 10% on one side and 15% on the other for 25% or something?
That's correct. Yeah, this is just what was in before. All the current houses were already built according to the standard in most cases. So yeah, it does apply to existing homes and new homes.
Yeah, but you can't, if it doesn't meet it as a new existing home, is my point, it gets grandfathered in.
Yeah. Are you concerned about? I'm sure your house meets the standard.
I'm sure it does, but I'm not talking about my house.
No,
No.
there are probably some that don't, because I don't know when this standard was adopted. But again, we just want to have it consistent throughout the code. Number of principal buildings. Currently, it's shown as not being regulated. We're proposing that it be changed to 1 principal building per lot in a single-family residential district. This is just,
Clarification.
clarification. This is pretty much standard. Driveways, there's a section in the CD4 and CD5 districts that says driveway/vehicular entrance maximum width is 10-foot max in the first and second lot layers. We're proposing to delete that because there's a standard listed actually right below it that says for residential, the maximum is 10 feet, but for commercial, the maximum is 24 feet. So we're suggesting we just eliminate this and keep the other one because that other one is more accurate. Okay, that concludes the missing elements and clarifications. The next are, again, minor amendments, but dealing more with development standards. So these are some changes that we're proposing, but we don't think they're significant changes. So for a mixed use district, the principal building side setback is currently unregulated in the CD4, the CDA, and CD4B district.
Okay, I'm sorry, mixed use again. Tell me again where these are, because this CD stuff and CDA, you're losing me. It's like sitting in statistics class.
All right, let me show you again. I'll flip over.
So is this all of these modifications for this particular zoning on this run?
No, there's some residential in here as well. So again, this is the CD4A, the yellow.
Yellow.
So that's most of the
Most of
commercial
Ridge Road,
areas
most of Calumet.
along Ridge and Calumet.
I think.
The CD5 is a higher intensity district that's concentrated around Ridge and Manor, where the proposed train station is, Calumet and Ridge, which is kind of like the crossroads. And those are really the only CD5 districts. And then the CD4B is the former Lansing Country Club, the Midwest Industrial Park, and the property here in between Calumet and Columbia. The south edge of town. Yeah, by Fitness Point and some of those other areas.
All right.
So then you also see that CD5 is here too, next to the Manor or the Main Street station, where transit-oriented development could possibly occur. And then again, CD4A is here along Main Street and then here along 45th Street.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Stuff here. Oh, I went back to the wrong one. Hold on. Okay. All right. So as I was saying, the principal building side setback. So that's the main building on the lot. In the CD4A, in CD4B, there's no maximum side setback, which means you could potentially have, a small building with a very large parking lot next to it. In the CD5 district, which is that higher intensity use district, there's a 24-foot maximum setback per side. So it would be wide enough for 2 lanes of 2 vehicular lanes, right? So an inbound lane and an outbound lane on either side. What we're
For each additional property?
For each property, they could have 24 feet on either side.
In the highest density, you're making the driveways wider.
No, they're not wider. That's just what they're permitted. That's the maximum.
Okay.
On either side. So what we're proposing in the CD4A district and the CD4B district is to cap the side setback at 130 feet. What that would do is that would allow, in keeping with what's permitted in our code, there to be some parking on either side of a building, right? So it would be a maximum of 4 rows of parking, which would be okay. It's kind of consistent with some of our other standards that we have in the code related to frontage build-out requirements. So the maximum and minimum percentage of a lot that can be lot frontage that could be built out with a building. And then in the CD5 district, where suggesting that we increase the maximum setback to 30 feet, which would allow those 2 lanes of traffic plus a sidewalk. So in the event that there was parking in the rear of a building, you could park in the back and walk out through that side setback line and not be walking in a drive aisle. And then we're also proposing that we increase that to 54 feet on one side if the other side setback is 0 to 6. So what that would allow you to do is kind of consolidate those 2 30-foot setbacks, which would be distributed between the 2 sides, into a single side. And what that would do, again, is that would allow a limited amount of parking, essentially just a sidewalk, drive aisle, and 1 row of parking on the side of a building. I'll also say that, you know, in all cases, parking on the side of the building has to be screened from the frontage.
I mean, where's the flow? I mean, so if I pull in and I park, I park on the side of the building, how am I going to be able to keep moving out without having to back up how I came in? I mean, if you have these dense things, chutes, right?
Yeah, you would have to come in, you'd have to come in and come out at the same, but you'd have the width for 2 lanes, an inbound lane and an outbound lane.
All right, so you're stacking them and packing them, and then you're going to try to force 2 lanes of traffic in 1 row of parking.
Not forcing it, just allowing for it. Again, and this is not something where we're mandating.
It's code.
We're not it's a maximum, so it's an option is what we're providing.
So is this trying to figure out how to park in a TOD where everybody's walking when it's 30 below 0?
Well, that has something to do with it, yes. I mean, what it's saying is that there may be instances where you may want to have some limited parking on the side of a building rather than behind it in the CD5 district. And then in the CD4 district, we're saying in those instances, we also still want to limit that, right? Because we want to ensure that we don't have wide gaps between buildings. In order to have that walkable kind of feel, you really need to have the street frontage be consistent, and you need to have that consistent street wall. So that's why we're limiting the CD4A and the CD4B.
But weren't we always trying to just get parking in the back? And the more breaks we have along a major road is more unsafe for bikers, walkers, and everybody else?
Yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to do to a certain degree with the CD4A and the CD4B, right? So we still only permit a single curb cut per lot. Right now, there is no maximum side setback in those districts. So what we're doing is we're tightening it up. We're saying the most you could do, which currently you could do, you know, a lot more potentially. We're saying the most you could do now would be 130 feet. And that's consistent with our other requirements like frontage build out. In the CD5 district, we are saying you could consolidate potentially those 2 side yards into a single essentially row of parking on the side of the building.
But like the councilman says, by providing that opportunity, you're opening up for more curb cuts as well.
No, the curb cuts would be the same. So actually, if you were to do this, you would actually consolidate the curb cuts potentially at a single point.
Tom, are there any examples of something like this in town currently?
It's a good question. Not really, because we just don't have we don't have that urban fabric that we're seeking to achieve here. So I wish I could give you a good example of where that's the case. I just don't have one.
But when somebody wants to spend millions of dollars in town to do a development in one of these particular districts and runs into a parking challenge or can't park for the amount of square footage and can't meet the code for a number of spaces, because is that changing with the aspect of this? No. So you're still going to say if I've got 10,000 square feet, I need X amount of spaces.
Correct.
Wait a minute.
So
I'm not spending my money here. I'm going somewhere else.
what I'm telling you is that I'm not making it more strict. This doesn't really make it more strict for the CD5. in any way. It does make it a little bit more strict for the CD4, but it only makes it more strict in the sense that it's more consistent with another standard that we already have, which is the frontage build out. So
Which is
regardless,
shoots.
shoots would be 100% frontage build out. In the CD4 and CD4B district, we only require 60% frontage build out. So if you had a 100-foot wide lot, you could, the building would have to essentially be 60 feet wide.
Right.
The other 40 could be open.
So folks, just think about this. Think about the old Jones Clinic. This would be applicable to the Jones Clinic, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a CD4A district.
Right. So that's a big lot of stuff, and we're providing certain restrictions.
Right. So, you know, if you had a big lot, okay, just imagine this. You have a very large lot. It's being redeveloped in a CD4A or CD4B district. You're only required to have the 60% frontage build out. So, you know, imagine it's a 200-foot wide lot.
Yeah.
You would be required to build out 120 feet of it. You could have 80 feet of parking, right?
On the front.
Right. So what we're suggesting is we cap that to 130 feet combined. So you couldn't necessarily, and actually that's a bad example because that would exceed that, but
Plus you have the square footage requirement,
Right.
plus the number of spaces.
right. But
Plus
currently,
you already have everybody around it completely different.
right.
I guess I would like to make it, I would like, can we just take this one off the table for right now? And so you can show us examples of what we're talking about here. So again, I really go with the other ones. I'm just thinking, you know, for us to move forward, I think seeing some examples of how this works, so we don't get ourselves, you know, in a trick bag with this, I think would help.
Sure. I mean, I can do that. I'm not, I'll just tell you that I'm not, we can take it off. I mean, I'm not concerned that this is gonna have adverse impacts. Like I said, I think it's tightening it up where it's very loose, which is in the CD4A and CD4B district, and then loosening it up where it's very tight in the CD5 district. So, but that being said, we can table this one if that's.
Again, I'll leave it open for other people to talk about it, but
I just have, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have one question. The problem that has been just brought up is that the need for parking per square foot, you know, et cetera, but you can still have the parking in the back. This isn't keeping it, you know, so there's still place for parking. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Except like in the TOD, Councilwoman, you know, where you have it stacked and packed, there's not a lot of room for parking in the back because the land will be so expensive, they're gonna try to put as much building as possible on that lot. Similar to like at Five Guys, they're gonna try to put as much building on there as they possibly will be allowed.
Right. I was just thinking about the Jones Clinic example.
Right.
But yes, I see what you're saying too. It's a mixed
So
bag.
there you, and it's trying to do a lot of things to the point where if we want to try to bring investment in, we want to try to know what kind of investment we want to see in those particular locations. And does this facilitate that, or does it create more challenges? I mean, we'll get another bite at the apple, I suppose, but why would we want to lose a deal while we wait for that to happen?
My personal opinion is that this will facilitate that.
Facilitate not having an issue.
Because it will provide additional flexibility. Like I said, in the area where it's very tight, the CD5, it loosens it up a little bit.
Thank you.
In the area where it's very loose, CD4.
I don't think you're gonna see an example, Councilman. I don't know how you could draw out something on a lot to be able to give you all the different iterations, because I mean, on some of those lots, unless somebody buys the whole thing, they're a small slice of heaven, and they're gonna jam as much stuff in there as they possibly can. And if we want to walk, then, I mean, I don't know if you're gonna make them park on the lot like you would at a restaurant or not.
So just as a way of conceptualizing this, as I said, this would permit in a CD4 A or B district, 4 rows of parking and 2 drive aisles. So that's the width. That gives you basically 60 feet of, or 130 feet of a side yard. So that's the width of 130 feet. In the CD5 district, you get essentially half of that, 54 feet.
Well, with all due respect, the predecessor sold me the same bag of goods for the Five Guys thing, and that place, I wouldn't drive in that lot, even if it's behind the door.
Well, this, like I said, this isn't limiting the parking in any way. It's just providing another avenue for the designers to work with our existing standards. Now, that being said, I don't want to get bogged down.
But a CD5 district now could have, with this, could have a 24-foot side lot.
Right.
54.
Parking on both sides.
No, you can't fit parking in 24 feet wide.
Only one, and then 2 lanes of traffic to pull in and out. So you'd have to pull in, back out, do a 3-point and go back out the way you came.
This is a side setback.
Right. So imagine this.
Maximum 30 feet.
So that the 24 feet
Okay.
would allow 2 12-foot lanes. If you're driving in a parking lot, you're driving in a 12-foot lane. And that's what's required in order to back out of the parking space.
So the minimum, there can be no side setback.
Correct.
And the what the CD 4A and 4B, 130 feet maximum combined, that means 60 on one side, 70 on the other side?
Essentially, yes. Currently, there's no standard at all. So you could, I mean, you couldn't because there, like I said, there are other standards, such as frontage build out that would prohibit you from having a small building on a very wide lot.
And you're still, what is that frontage build out percentage? That's a 60%?
60%.
Okay. I misread earlier that I thought we were talking about almost a 30% or a 30-foot minimum.
No.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's no, in both of these districts, there's no minimum setback.
You want to still flag this, Councilman, or we want to move on?
I'm fine moving forward with it.
Okay.
With that explanation.
Anybody else? Because I can't see anybody else on the Zoom, so I just want to let you all know I can't see you, so.
Here, let's see.
Minimize them again, sorry.
Okay. All right.
That was a joke.
Okay, so
I think we're-
we'll keep that one in for now. All right, similarly to the previous standard here, there's currently a maximum lot width in those same CD4 and CD5 districts. Currently, there's a 180-foot maximum lot width in the CD4 districts and a 100-foot maximum lot width in the CD5 district. Just in the short time that we've been using this code, we've identified a number of conflicts. In the CD4 district specifically, we've seen instances where people have tried to consolidate 2 lots in order to do a redevelopment project, and they've run afoul of this standard. They've been at like 190 or 200, and likewise in the CD5 district, there's been, for example, 407 and 411 Ridge Road. And they're capped at 100 feet. If those lots were to be combined together, they, I believe, are 120 feet. So what we're proposing is that we take that CD4 standard and move it to the CD5 district. So we'd allow a little bit larger, wider lots, wider buildings, and then just eliminate the maximum lot width altogether for the CD4 districts. And again, the rationale behind that is just to allow additional flexibility in these mixed use districts, because we know that in many cases, we're going to be dealing with consolidation of lots. And we also know that there's a certain economy of scale that redevelopment needs to hit in order to make it worthwhile. It's very difficult to do, say, a very small mixed-use building, right? Until that concept has been really proven.
No, I like the flexibility. It's a good thing.
So that's what we're proposing. Any other questions or comments on that? Okay. Off-street parking location, we were talking a little bit about this earlier. The current code says that off-street parking is permitted in the third lot layer only for the CD4 and A and CD4B. It's the same for CD5. The third lot layer begins 20 feet beyond the front facade of the building. We think that that's kind of a meaningless standard for these districts. We already have a provision in our code that says if there's parking in the second lot layer, which is the area immediately behind the facade, that it has to be screened by a fence and a hedge. So we think what we're hoping to do is change it so that we would just permit parking in the second lot layer. So it would be basically to the side of the building if it's screened by this hedge and fence. So there would be sort of a 7-foot setback from the front of the building for parking instead of a 20-foot setback from the front of the building.
Do you think you're gonna get landscaping when you're stacking and packing them like this? Seriously, I mean, you could put a hedge in, it's a lot of money. It's not gonna get water, you're gonna make it irrigated, you're gonna do all that stuff too.
It's basically just a hedge. And I have an illustration for this.
Thank you.
Hey.
So this is from our landscaping section, so just bear with me. But this is essentially how the parking would work in a CD4 district currently. You have the building facade. This is assuming it's built, to maybe 10 feet from the front property line. And then you have a space of 20 feet beyond that front facade, which is called the second lot layer. Currently, you can't have parking spaces in there. Parking can only be in the third lot layer, which begins here, 20 feet beyond. So with this change, you would still be required to have this continuous hedge, which you can see here, to screen the parking, but basically you'd be allowed one additional parking space on either side. So what that does is it kind of eliminates this, what I think is kind of an arbitrary setback for the parking in a business district, and reduces it from a 20-foot setback to just a 7-foot setback, which is the minimum I think that you need to have the screening of the parking, so you don't have the visual prominence of parking lots. So that's what we're proposing for the CD4 A and B districts. CD5, because it is a more intense use district, again, and there's not going to be parking on the side really outside of that one row, we're still leaving it as third lot layer only.
Do you know that past example of that building is very inefficient because everybody's gonna wanna come in through the back to come to where they park. Nobody's gonna wanna walk all the way around the front and walk into the building. I'm just telling you, at least where I grew up, which is here.
Well, that may be true, but if you can imagine
One illustration he gives you.
Well, I mean, that's what we're doing though. We're pushing everything to the front. And I'm just saying that, you want to come into John's from the parking lot. You want to come into Shoots from the parking lot. When's the last time you went to Shoots and you walked around the building? Never.
I did when I walked there. Just saying.
Okay, one person did. And she happens to be an elected official.
That was prior to that. But in any case, that's what we're doing. It's making it out. It's not a significant change, but I think it's just something where we're eliminating this.
So just in this example, if I want to put the building up and spend all this money and want to have the entrances off the lot, I'm losing that whole row of parking.
You would be losing this row right here. Yeah.
Yeah, or if I wanted to come, if I have 3 units in there coming in from the back where the parking is, like at Shoots.
I'm not sure. I'm not following you.
Never mind. The building, how you walk into a building from the back, there's a back door. I can't have parking spaces where the door is.
Yeah.
So all the spaces are going to get lost because the door is there.
Right. So in this instance, you could have a door on the side. but your main entrance still has to be in the front, but that's a different standard. Okay, facade articulation. It only applies to the CD4B district, which if you'll remember is the old Midwest Central Industrial Park, some areas along 45th Street, and the area between Columbia and Calumet south of 45th Street. We have a standard which it's in our CD4A, and in the B district. We're proposing to just eliminate it from the CD4B district. And what it does is it says anytime you have a facade greater than 100 feet in width, you have to make it look essentially like it's more than one building. We think that makes sense in the CD4A district, which is kind of like the Ridge Road corridor, the downtown kind of feel to it. The CD4B, when we passed the code, we envisioned it as being a little bit more flexible and kind of allowing for some different building types and not to be really too restrained. You know, the thought was like you could redevelop maybe like an industrial building into something interesting and cool. So we think that this standard really doesn't belong in that CD4B district. Again, it's not saying that you have no architectural standards. It's just saying you don't have this standard where you have to break up a 100-foot building into what appears to be two different buildings.
Mr. Chairman, is this, you said this is where, let's say, the current Harley Davidson or the former Harley Davidson is located there between BP and like the War Memorial? Or is this?
It's a good question. I'm not sure about the Harley Davidson building specifically, if that's, we could check.
A facade greater than 100 feet would be like Target, right?
Yeah, it would be like Target. That would be in the CD4A district. So that standard still applies. Yeah, this is the Harley. I'm assuming that I believe this is the Harley. So that's still CD4A. So that would still apply to that. But in this orange area here, it would not apply. And really, it's kind of one of those things too, where we know that this area is kind of pretty heavily medical and could probably end up being a lot of medical uses. And I kind of think that, you know, it just might work better to have sort of a little bit more variety and some flexibility in that area, because it's not necessarily going to be retail shops, you know, broken up into like little storefronts. It might be more office uses, in which case I don't think that standard really works well. It's not really applicable.
Can you scroll up to Ridge Road and Calumet and just see where the zoning differences are up there?
Yeah.
So this applies to the Lansing Country Club.
Yeah, this would apply, or this change would apply
I
to
don't think
Lansing
there's any
Country.
orange up there, Councilman.
Which again,
Okay, so it doesn't.
from what we hear, is likely going to be like office buildings, in which case, you know, do you really want to have like a nice office building like be broken up into these little storefronts? I just don't know if that's really the effect that we were looking for when we talked about that CD4B district. But yeah, this is all CD4A, so that still applies here in kind of the main walkable, what we're trying to envision as the walkable downtown area.
Okay.
I'll just say that the other thing is that facade articulation is not in the CD5 district at all either. So, and that's not a change, that's just what it's been. Okay. All right, this is a kind of a detailed slide. I'll just tell you that there's a whole section on screens in the CD4A, CD4B, and CD5 district. And it relates to certain items on a lot that have to be screened from the public right of way and how they have to be screened. So there's instances where they have to be screened by a hedge, a fence, a wall, or the building itself. And this includes parking areas, it includes loading areas, you can see it on the screen here, trash dumpster, dumpster enclosures, HVAC and different things, mechanicals, equipment and stuff like that. There's nothing really wrong with this section and the standards, but it's really has some strange terminology that's hard to interpret. And I think we've had, as a staff, have had some difficulty trying to interpret it, and we can only imagine what it would be like for a developer or an engineer who's trying to figure it out. I mean, there's just some strange terminology like non-residential and multifamily residential screen adjacent to or across thoroughfare from non-multifamily residential. It's very convoluted language. So we're just proposing to replace this whole page and all these standards with another wordy chart, but we think a little bit more easily understandable chart. So we broke it down. This is where screens are required. This is the types of screens that would be required. And then specific to each type of use, if it's a parking lot at the frontage, how does it have to be screened and what's the height of the screen? So it basically just says, where do you need a wall blocking the dumpster? And how tall does it have to be? Where do you need if there's a parking lot next to an alley, do you need to screen it? If so, how? So it's pretty simple. It is a revision because I think there are some minor revisions to it. Specifically, we included this type of screen called an enhanced hedge. And what it is when the town adopted that revision to the landscaping code, we had that provision for the fence plus the hedge. So we just gave it a name and call it an enhanced hedge. It's just the hedge plus the fence. So again, not really much has changed. It's just a little bit more clear. That's an example. We saw that before, but that's an example of all the types of screens, right? So you see there's the screen from the frontage for the parking, screening on the side, screening from the alley. This shows like where you have the enhanced hedge, where you have parking in the front. This would assume like you redeveloped a building and it was pre-existing and it had parking in the front already, which would not be permitted under the current code, but could be in the past. Moving on here, we have some specific conditional use standards for outdoor dining. And currently this is something that we actually asked our consultant to do, and I don't think they really hit the mark on it. So currently it says a restaurant with outdoor dining must meet the following requirements. Outdoor dining area may not be fenced. It may encroach on the public right of way only if it leaves clear at least a 4-foot clear walkway. And outdoor dining furniture must be made of aluminum, stainless steel, painted metal, and durable finished wood. What we're proposing is to clarify this a little bit and say that a restaurant with outdoor dining must meet the following requirements when visible from the public right of way. So we sometimes have outdoor dining that's not, it's in the back. They still need a conditional use because there are other things that we look at, such as noise and things like that, and lighting. But in terms of the regulation of the furniture and that type of thing, we don't think it's really relevant if it's not visible. So we're just saying that this only applies if they're in the public right of way, visible from the public right of way. And then we also added that any umbrellas or sunshades must be made of canvas because they tend to be not too attractive. They can be cheap plastic umbrellas or something like that. So that's pretty simple. Any questions? No?
And you remove the fencing requirement?
Yes. That's something that actually we want to see from time to time is the outdoor dining area be fenced because it kind of provides a separation from that. But it doesn't require it. It just doesn't prohibit it now. Or that's what we're proposing.
Got it. Thank you.
If you'll recall, when the 313 tap room got the conditional use for their outdoor dining area, the Plan Commission, or the Board of Zoning Appeals rather, and the Town Council specifically waived that requirement for that it not be fenced because they wanted to put in an ornamental fence. So I don't think anyone has any problem with that. Okay, so now we're dealing with some generally applicable standards. Again, these are applicable, excuse me, to pretty much all of the commercial districts, including a PUD, manufacturing, and civic zone. Private lighting standards, currently we exempt manufacturing and PUD districts from providing lighting in their parking lots. I don't know if that was an oversight or what, but we're proposing that we change that to include them. We state that the minimum illumination is 1 foot candle, and then we require ornamental fixtures and poles. What we're proposing, as I said, is including lighting requirements for the manufacturing and PUD districts, tweaking the illumination standard a little bit to make it an average rather than just a baseline minimum, because what we've found is that sometimes it's hard for lighting contractors to get a minimum of 1 foot candle throughout the entire lot, and you end up with some just extremely high light levels that are really unnecessary for accomplishing safety of cars and pedestrians. So we're changing that to a range where you have to hit an average, and that's another way of calculating the overall illumination. It's, if you look at any of the lighting plans that we've approved, they always have the average lighting shown on them. And then we're stating that the minimum would be 0.4. So that allows a pretty good range of lighting while still being safe, you know, for people walking in the parking lots. And then we're proposing that the appearance of the fixtures and the poles not be regulated. So as I said, I'm just going to show you the next slide. This is what our private lighting type chart looks like. You can see that a Cobra head, which is kind of like a standard street light, and this off-road head are not permitted. This is just like a standard, it's a poor illustration, but it's a standard parking lot light fixture. The only ones that are permitted in all these districts are the sort of ornamental light fixtures. For example, what you see at the Munster shops, right? This ornamental fixture. From our perspective, we think it would be nice if developers did ornamental fixtures in their parking lots, but you have to also think that what we're really striving for is most of the parking to be in the back or at worst on the side of the lot. So we're really not putting lighting in a prominent location. And lighting is, while it's nice to be ornamental, it's primarily functional. And so we're just suggesting that, you know, businesses can just install standard parking lot lights in their parking lots.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I personally would rather not see that changed, because anywhere you have ornamental, it's just more attractive. And if we're talking about areas that are very dense and you're going to be in a walking environment, you're going to be on all sides of the building. I don't know. I think that that's us taking a step backward when we've been trying to push the bar higher. So I'm not really, that's the first one that's been I'm really not in favor of.
Yeah, I get it. And we kind of talked about that when we, you know, put the code together a couple of years ago. And, you know, I guess my feeling as a staff person is that it would be nice to have this. I know that the town has been working on our own streetscaping plans, which would have ornamental lighting of our own, which would be prominent within the public right-of-way. You know, I'm not strongly for or against this revision. I just think this is something that, just in our discussions with different developers, it kind of takes everybody aback a little bit when they think that, when they learn that they have to have these types of like acorn lamps instead of just a standard light. I will say that we're We have other requirements for the lighting plan. So for example, the fixtures do have to be like full cutoff. So they can't be, you know, like these spotlights that just have glare. And they have to be directed down. And then they're also capped at a height of 20 feet. So they're still kind of pedestrian oriented, but again, this would just be the difference between having an ornamental and a more modern looking standard light that you might find in any other parking lot. So
Right. I think given our lack of available land, it's gonna be a premium. I guess if people they want to invest here, and there's gonna be a high premium anyway for the lots. And we might as well make them as nice as possible. That's just, this one I'd want to pull out to move forward, but I don't know what we have to, I don't want to stop the progress overall on us moving forward on these other items, but or maybe so we can have some more time to think about it, or what the consequences are gonna be, because I know everybody's gonna choose the cheaper light. It's just the nature of.
Excuse, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would agree with Councilman Mellon that, I mean, if you go through that 45th and Calumet where they've redone all the lighting and everything, it looks really, really nice. And to lower the standards and not require that in a new development. And I get that it's an additional added cost for a developer, but they're going to invest in 10. That's not that big of an expense. And I think it adds a lot, and the lighting and everything. I would agree with Councilman Mellon on this one.
Mr. Chairman, I agree as well. I like the ornamental light fixtures.
Mr. Chairman, I also agree with the ornamental light fixtures as well.
And Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would say is we're giving 3 possibilities here: Colonial, Coach, and Acorn. And I think in the streetscape we have an even more attractive design. So I don't know if we're limiting to just these 3 types. Maybe we could offer something, something else that would match with the new streetscape lamps as well. But otherwise I agree with Councilor Mellon.
okay, I'm hearing a pretty strong consensus that we want to leave this in. So if that's the case, I think my suggestion then would be that, we just ignore this proposal and we just, move on, and we'll leave that one out. If we decide to study it a little more further, a little further, and maybe see if we can incorporate some different styles, maybe ornamental ones that aren't necessarily historic, but still aesthetically a little bit better than standard light, we can do that too.
And I think I would even be up for it. It's something in the first lot, it's a certain standard, and something in the third lot, I could see being a different standard. Is certainly though, I would make sure that the color appearance, I think could be consistent, but I could see a different light specified for the first lot or second lot, but the third lot layer being a little bit more industrial. But
yeah, that's a good suggestion. Okay, I think it's fine with me. We can take this off the table and we'll put a little more study to it. If we run into a situation where it is becoming, there's a need for more variety or something like that, we can study it. Okay, we're still at the generally applicable standards here. So tree replacement. This is
number 15 of 350, because I've been numbering them and writing my notes next to them.
some of these include multiple line items on the spreadsheet. So I don't have 449 slides. I have about 40 slides. So we're nearly there, if not halfway. Okay. So tree replacement, this applies to any district. Anytime there's a development, the current code says that trees of 10 inches EBH, which diameter breast height, I believe is what it stands for, or greater that are removed for development shall be replaced. So that's a very broad brush. Anytime there's a tree that's larger than 10 inches, you can remove it for any reason. It's got to be replaced, and it has to be replaced at a specific ratio. So if it's larger, you have to replace it at a 2-to-1, 3-to-1, or even 4-to-1 ratio. So that ordinance has been reviewed actually by our attorney, and he suggested that we change that because it may be a little bit too, asking a little bit more than we really should be asking for. And so what we're proposing to do is actually change the ordinance to provide some exemptions. So for example, if a tree is diseased, dying, unsafe, or invasive, then it would be exempted from that replacement requirement. And then the proposal also clarifies the process for replacing the tree or paying a fee in lieu. And I'll just be honest with you, we took this from the city of Valparaiso. So this is their tree replacement ordinance. It's similar to ours in some sense in terms of the replacement ratio, but it has some exemptions in it that we came up with, and we added to the Valpo ordinance. And then it also caps the amount of fee that you can pay. So it gives you other options. If you can't fit the replacement trees on the development that you're doing, you can put them on a different site, or you can pay a fee in lieu. And it caps that at $10,000 per project. So right now we have in our fee schedule a fee in lieu actually of $350 per tree. So if you can imagine, if you cut down 3 trees, you needed to replace them, then you'd pay 350 times 3, so 10,050, right? And that would be the fee that would go into the town's true. It would go into our landscaping fund, so the town would use it to plant trees elsewhere in town. Any questions about that? Again, that's making it a little bit more flexible and a little less, just if you cut down 30 trees, you could find yourself in a position of paying $50,000 to the town or something like that. It would just be a lot to handle. So again, this is a good practice that we took from another good community.
And Mr. Chairman, a question. The 10,000 per project, is there a reason it was done per project and not sort of per lot? I mean, presumably a smaller project versus a bigger project might have a different limit that would make sense.
No, like I said, we took this from Valparaiso, so yeah, I mean, I think that was the contribution limit that they had, and yeah, it seemed like it's really a function of the number of trees, right? So if you take down, X number of trees, you'll hit that $10,000 mark. Now, the other thing that is sort of in the background of all this is that we would, of course, work with a developer on a site plan when it comes to the plan commission to encourage them not to cut down trees if they don't have to. So if there was, and really this is not that common in Munster anymore. We don't really have, stands of forest outside of maybe the Ridge Road area, where it would be, somebody would be cutting down a massive amount of trees. Most of the land is redevelopment, and it's not going to hit that $10,000 mark anyway.
Any other questions as we move it along? Good, yeah.
All right, parking maximums. We talked about this at the last meeting, and we currently have in all the commercial districts a provision that says you cannot install more than 10% the minimum number of parking spaces. So we had a long discussion about this, and I think the consensus from the planning commission at the last meeting was to not eliminate that, which is what I had suggested, but change it so that it was no more than 100% greater than the number of spaces of parking. So that's kind of strangely, but I'll just say that in the spreadsheet that I gave you, it states 200%. So I think what we're hoping to accomplish is double the minimum. So I think that would be more than 100% greater than. Again, the rationale behind that is that we just don't know if we're like in a position to say that somebody who, you know, is capped at, like, say the parking minimum is 12 spaces and they say they need 15, they would exceed that 10%. I mean, that just seems to me like the wrong reason to go get a variance just because you want to add 3 more spaces. Now, if you're in a situation where you have a very large parking lot, then that number would be much greater. But I think it's still, the visual effect of the parking is still controlled by some of those other standards, which we've already talked about, such as the maximum side setback, the frontage build out. So I think we can still achieve sort of the design that we want and have a little bit more flexibility in the parking. And then the other thing that I'll just point out is that the town has really little to no public parking available. So if there was a situation where a business needed some overflow parking, there's no place to do that because we just don't have public parking. We don't have on-street parking in most areas, and we don't have public parking lots. So
Is that on the table being reviewed as far as trying to find some space for a public parking spot as we try to increase the density?
yes, as a matter of fact, it is. So that was part of the streetscaping plan that we are just finalizing right now.
Yeah, parking on the street.
On-street parking lots.
Okay, that's
Public parking. There's potential for some other areas too. Are there any questions about that one? No? Okay. Okay, wow, those were the insignificant amendments. Here's the significant ones. So we have got a whole section on signs, and I'll try to just boil it down to really there's 3 changes that we're making. The first is to awning signs, second is to wall signs, and then the third is to monument signs. So I'll go through each one of them. And these all really just apply to the business districts, PUD, the manufacturing, and the civic zones. So the first revision is to the awning sign standard. So currently awning signs are really limited. I'll just show you. This is basically what's permitted. A very small lettering on the valence of an awning. And what we're proposing is that this is based on kind of some of the interaction that we've had with some of the businesses that are in town already, specifically along Ridge Road, who have only really room for awning signs, and they don't really have any additional space for a wall sign. What we kind of came up with, and we looked at a couple other different communities to see how they deal with this, but currently, like I said, you have to have basically lettering on that valance could be between 5 and 10 inches. We're proposing that we revise the code to say if there's no additional wall sign, the wall sign is specifically defined, you can essentially use your awning as you would a wall, right? So you can put a larger sign on your awning. And so what that would mean is, again, that we borrowed this from another community. We're saying that a sign may cover 30% of the awning, and then we're increasing the letter height to 3 feet, which would be consistent with our wall sign standards. And I'll just show you, this is basically what we're proposing. So this is a shot of Lake Street in Oak Park. And this is, there's no place for a wall sign on these buildings. So they have a much larger sign on their awning. And you can see that it's limited to 30% of the overall awning. There's 1/3 blank, 1/3 filled, and 1/3 blank again. But you have the ability to basically put a larger sign on the building and use your awning for it. So we still have the
provision
same.
that says, excuse me, that the glass is not included as a definition of a wall.
That's right. Yeah, there's a separate standard for the glass. Okay. And to be honest with you, we're very restrictive on the glass because of the history of this town, people putting up just really tacky window signs. So we limit window signs to a single window. I believe it's no more than 25% of the window if it's individual letters, 15% if it's a solid background. So we don't really permit a whole
But
lot
for
of
this
window
thing,
signs.
glass is not considered a wall.
No, no. The wall sign, I mean, if you remove the awning, you can put a wall sign here, but because they have the awning, you know, they really don't have a spot for it. It's similar to what we have on Ridge Road. If you look at shoes, for example, since we've been talking about shoes. With the awning, they don't have a place for, you know, for any type of a wall sign. So we think it makes sense that you can basically draw a parallel between those two sign types and allow them to have a sign that would be the size of a wall sign, but it's just printed on it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
is there some consistency? So every sign on a building like Shoop's is the same kind of look and lettering, so we don't have 10 different colors and 10 different fonts?
And how's that the town versus the developer or the owner of the building who approves this facade?
First guy that gets his signs got to match the other ones.
Yeah, we don't have that provision, but to be honest with you, everybody's been doing that. Without
If
us,
everyone's doing it, why would we want to put it in there to make sure it's consistent then?
yeah. I mean, we didn't think of that. It hasn't been a problem. So, I don't know. I guess it's up to you guys. If you think that that's something that should happen, I know we
Well, we've
have.
seen a lot of folks that's come in and say, I need red because Wendy's has red or we like yellow because it's Applebee's and we have to have yellow.
Right.
So, I mean, we've seen that movie.
Well, here's a building you're looking at right in front of you that, you know, it's pretty similar at least. The writing's all in white. The font may be a little bit different, but it looks like both awnings are hunter green, right?
Yeah, that's what it appears to be. Yeah, we don't have any regulations of that currently, but it doesn't, like I said, it hasn't been a problem thus far. I don't know. I mean, if that's something that you think we need to put in there.
I
we
tell
can
you,
look
Tom,
at
I'd like
that.
to take a look at it too. Legally.
What's that?
I said, I'd like to take a look at it legally too. We can do that quickly, I think.
To regulate the color?
Right.
You may want to borrow from another community.
Yep, that might be just.
Well, do you want to try to incorporate it into this, or is that something that we can revisit?
You don't have it in now, correct?
Correct.
Well, you know, there are going to be additional changes. They're always are.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we can always add it in later.
Okay, moving along.
I guess my only question is the signs in that window, then, do those count against the sign ordinance or no? Would that eyeglass shop, is that consistent to what Munster would approve?
With,
Yeah, the code says now, the signage?
with the window sign? No.
Yeah.
No.
So what we're approving is the awning sign, as long as there's no signage in the windows.
There's never permitted any sign in the windows. We don't look at them together. So
Okay.
you could have a window sign irrespective of the size of your awning sign. The standard for the window sign is the standard for the window sign, regardless of your other signs. The only kind of push and pull on this is that you can have a larger awning sign if you don't have a wall sign.
Okay.
Okay, speaking of wall signs, so the next one is wall signs, and there's some change in here that we're proposing. Currently, the code calls them band signs, and it refers to the sort of the band of, you know, like the facade above the storefront, and we're just changing it to wall sign, and the reason is that band sign terminology doesn't make sense. Nobody understands what we're talking about when we talk about band signs. So it's a wall sign. We're just proposing that we change it to be a wall sign. So currently we have a standard for width and height. The maximum width is 100% the width of the facade, and the maximum height of a wall sign is 3 feet. We talked about this a little bit at the last meeting, and what we're proposing is essentially two variations. One would be related to the building setback. So if the building setback is 100 feet or greater, then a larger sign would be permitted. And if the sign material itself was externally illuminated or backlit, then a larger sign would be permitted. So a channel letter sign is basically what we permit right now at a height of, is it 36 or 24 current? 36, right? So what we would be doing is we're saying, if you have a channel letter sign and you're less than 100 feet from the roadway, the maximum height you can be is 24 inches. Those are brighter, more prominent signs. However, I'm sorry, so that would be the letter height, and then the overall height of the sign, if you had a backer of some sort, could be larger, 36 inches. If you did a more sort of subdued type of sign, which was externally illuminated, imagine like a gooseneck lamp coming out and lighting some solid metal letters or wood letters or something like that, then you can have a larger sign. So the letters themselves can be up to 3 inches in height, and the overall height of the sign could be 48 inches. So you could either do smaller letters that had up to 48 inches in height, or you could do a 48-inch backer of some kind. And then once you exceed that 100-foot setback, then everything moves up to be a little bit larger again. So the channel letter sign gets increased to 36 and 48 inches, and the better material sign gets increased to 48 inches and 72 inches. So again, this is talked about at the last meeting. I think this is two things. One, it recognizes that there are some existing buildings that have a pretty deep setback that need visibility from the road. And then two, it kind of provides an incentive to use a little bit better materials, because typically what we found is that businesses want to have the largest signs they can possibly have. And if we can use that as a carrot to get them to put up kind of like a little bit of a nicer sign, then I think that's a good practice that we can institute. I think we can get some good results from that. Just as a point of reference, this US Nails sign, that's a 2-foot channel letter. So that would be the maximum height of a channel letter up to 100 feet of setback. Currently, the standard would permit a 3-foot channel letter. So just imagine 30% larger channel letter sign right at the street. It's too big. So we think that this size is okay. We think it's acceptable up to 100 feet setback, and then once you get farther, then you can make it a little bit larger. But I don't have a good illustration here or a good example of what the other type of sign would be, but you might want to think about the Harvest Room sign on Calumet Avenue, the one that faces Calumet Avenue. That's individual letters. They have a kind of a gray background, middle backer, but I think it's externally illuminated, so they would be allowed a little bit larger sign, because again, you don't have those glowing letters.
So what you're saying is this is legal right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is less than legal, right?
Less than legal. And what we're saying is we don't want anything bigger than this sign.
Correct, yeah.
It's up to 100.
Not in the channel letter. So if it was a different type of letter, I mean, on this building, you couldn't.
You don't have a picture of the Harvest Room that you're talking about, do you?
Let me see if I can find one. Not sure. Let me see if I can get to it. Here. Let me zoom out here. Bear with me a second. I'll try to get a street view of that. I don't know if South Shore Eye Care is on the street.
If you look at a Harvest Room street view, you can see their sign.
Yeah, so that's, as you can see, that's, individual letters. I think they're backlit letters. So that would be permitted. The letters have a one height standard, and then there's additional height provided for like the backing of the sign. So that's kind of the idea. Again, we're encouraging people to be a little bit less geared towards these really large sort of channel letters.
Is Kataro's sign a backlit sign, or is that
That's a channel letter. Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad sign. The only thing is with the channel letters, it can be kind of hit or miss.
what do you mean channel letters? Is that there's no backing? They're not individual?
The channel letter is like, each one of these letters is kind of like a small light cabinet.
Okay, so they're lighted.
Right.
Okay.
With a translucent face.
I
that
got you.
the
Okay.
light shines out.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, so when I'm looking at these and I see, I mean, I agree that if the material is going to be better, if there's an incentive, if you make better material, it can be a little larger. But if we're making changes to the sign, couldn't we just go say, there are no channel letters? Because, I mean, I don't want to pick out one business in particular that I saw and thought, I really don't like that, but let's just think about the corridor being redeveloped, like Ridge Road. You want all these differences? I mean, it'd be nice to have the consistency, just like we were talking about the awnings. And so I feel like this is our opportunity. You could make it a little bit bigger, give that allowance, but say, we're just not gonna allow channel letters anymore. I mean, is there anything that says you have to? I mean, I've seen,
No.
yeah, so.
Honestly, that's a conversation that we've had internally, Nicole and myself, about it, because, we're trying to, you try to set up the ordinance, it's hard to promote good things. You really try to prevent the worst things from happening. And yeah, I mean, I think we could do that, but to be honest with you, the channel letter is just so ingrained in the businesses and the sign contractors, and they want the channel letter so much that, like, I don't know, I mean,
But I assume they want the business where they want it more than they want a channel letter. I mean,
yeah,
and I've been to, communities where everything does have this nicer look, and even some have, everything has to be the same color, so you can't have any branding.
right.
So it may be ingrained, but, maybe it's time for the sign makers to,
Yeah, I mean, I think,
move on.
I mean, it's,
So,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, we would do whatever the plan commission wants to do,
Right.
but, like, my opinion is that I'd like to give businesses some flexibility. Like, if they really have I mean, to me, it sounds strange, but like, businesses have their hearts set on certain things. And when we tell them like they can't do, like, they'll get their heart set on doing a channel letter sign. And then when we tell them that they can't do it, it's like devastating to them. Because they have like an emotional investment in like the vision that they have for their building or whatever. And so the approach that we're really trying to take is to be somewhat flexible, but again, incentivize the other things. And we think that, to be honest with you, if we enact this proposal as we put it forward, we think we could probably steer most people towards that better sign, because, to be honest with you, a lot of times it's cheaper to do the better sign, because it's not as complex as doing this illuminated light box, which is the channel letter. Like, you just run a couple lamps and do some. We've talked about the 313 tap room sign.
yeah, it was great.
Right, they did it. They built that themselves.
Oh.
So I mean, it wasn't expensive.
Yeah, but it looks 10 times more expensive.
Right.
It's
So,
nicer looking, yeah.
I mean, I don't know, I would say that our desire as the staff is to be as flexible as we can, but that's a standard that the planning commission wants. So I think that we
And
can do
Mr.
it.
Chairman, Tom, is it your feeling that the larger sign is a big incentive for developers? Like they'd rather have the larger sign, so they're willing to go with the higher quality materials?
Yeah, I think so. In most instances, especially with small businesses, because they're, because they're oftentimes less costly and they get more exposure. For somebody like a McDonald's or whatever, they just do whatever the corporate brain says they have to do. But again, I don't know. I mean, I think with everything that we're proposing tonight, I think we're trying to include some flexibility and some give and take, but still maintain some high standards and still provide incentives for doing good things.
Okay, so going back to the previous slide of US Nails, we're actually, this proposal in front of us is to make those channel letters no larger than what we see there.
Right, that's correct.
And that's 2 foot and
So that would be the maximum.
yeah.
Like I said, currently,
Chairman,
we do 3 feet.
looking at the building where the subway and stuff is, I would vote against keeping the channel letter, keeping the sign up on the screen as part of our ordinance. I think it's hideous.
Thank you.
But that's the same sign as Kataro, and you like that though. It's the same make. It's just not as attractive of a design. Just more colors. And channel letters, that's what they do. Each is almost its own individual sign.
Right.
And it's just like anything else. You could have a house that's really nice, but some people don't like it because it's not designed very well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sometimes I think when you give too many options, it's easier to stick with a few options and make things more consistent, in my opinion.
but we ran into this with the corporate folks. So if we want to bring in a lot of bigger businesses too, you have a completely different thing where you're trying to tell somebody that does it all over the country, not here, which I understand, and they do it in a lot of places, but a lot of those places also have double the household income that we do.
But I don't think we have to sell ourselves short. I
No,
mean,
not at all.
we don't have to have giant bright M's for McDonald's. Everybody knows where McDonald's is. If it never blows down, I'd love to make it smaller. Yeah, but
Well, and I would like to not have the drive-through on the street too, but that was a huge fight, and there it is.
Well, let me make a suggestion, because as we were researching this, a lot of times there are more strict sign ordinances with respect to like sign types for downtown areas. So like a lot of times, as I'm sure you've experienced, you go to like the cute downtown and they don't permit channel letters. You can only have a shingle or
Right.
a,
That's why you have the zoning pods.
right. So if we implement this change right now, we're going to make it an improvement. But it might be a good idea to think about where in particular we really want to restrict it. And maybe, maybe when we get, maybe I'm just thinking about like our streetscaping plan and some of the things that we've done there. That might be the first step to say, well, within this area defined by our streetscaping ordinance,
Distance from the curb, just like here. You do it like that.
yeah,
So if you're gonna push all the buildings like this up against the curb like that, for this distance, you can only do this kind of signage. I mean, that's an option,
I mean, if we really wanted to kind of,
because you don't need a
Clamp it
big
down
sign
a
when you're
little
2
more.
feet away from the street.
right,
Just an idea.
Yeah, that's right. Right now we're at less than 100, but you could do a smaller distance and then have more restrictive, no channel letters, for example.
Is that something that you want to do now, or should we give a little more thought? I mean, we can keep making amendments.
Tom, would your view be that this type would be grandfathered, in other words, until the time came that it was falling off?
Oh, yeah, for this particular sign, yeah, it would be.
So you're gonna have them for a while, I don't know how long. You're not gonna have them.
Yeah. Um,
Well, it is
Yeah.
nice though, when a new tenant goes in, that can't be there anymore, because that's kind of what we do with the pole signs. You know, there were 4, but we had them all in the corner of Bridge and Calumet. Now we don't have,
Right.
we don't have any, and it looks so much better. So and you have to, and that has been how many things over the years, that
Yeah.
one business lot. So the next time someone, it's incremental, I know, but
Yeah, and actually, this is an interesting picture, just because you have the US Nails, which is not the most attractive sign, but then you have the Verizon sign, which is actually not that bad. That's also a channel letter sign. So it's just, it kind of, depends who the designer is.
And I guess the other thing though, you probably can't restrict the amount of colors on those. That's really, the Kataro too was a consistent color. The
Yeah,
US Nails sticks out because and that's what the sign companies want, is something that sticks out.
yeah.
And so you kind of,
I mean, we could restrict the colors. I just don't know if we want to go that far. That's, that's really detailed types of regulations. So I don't know. What do you think? Should we?
I think we should move on since we got 17,000 more slides.
I would say, I think there's enough there that maybe we're actually, the proposal is to make it stronger right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We can always make it even stronger.
Or that, I'm thinking that we're making it the policy right now, so that US Nail sign isn't 3 feet, it's only 2 feet. So we're making the policy stronger.
Yeah.
So I'm almost thinking it might be better to keep it in here, but then still come back to the whole idea of what signs, with this channel letter versus
Yeah.
backlit or, sign coming out. So I'm fine keeping it in there just because it's a strong ordinance. Then if we take it out, there's still bigger signs to pull out.
How many more signage slides are there? Because maybe we just take signs again and do a separate meeting on signs for everyone, because everybody's got a different opinion about what a sign's gonna be. Marketing guy, huh?
There's only one more.
Oh, okay. Then fine. Let's go.
Okay, all right, so, I'm interpreting this as we're leaving that in for now, but you want us to even come back.
We only got one more to talk about.
Do
So
a
yeah.
more detailed study of appropriate, where channels are appropriate. Okay.
All the signs are already moving.
All right, so the final sign issue has to deal with monument signs, and again, we talked about this before at the meeting last month. Currently, we permit an 18 square foot maximum area for a monument sign, and a maximum height of 6 feet, which includes the base, which would be brick or stone or whatever, matching the building. We are proposing to make a few different changes to that. The first is that we're establishing a minimum for the height of that base, right? So it has to be either the greater of 20% of the overall sign height or 24 inches. And that just ensures that they do a substantial masonry base for the monument. And then again, similar to the wall signs, we're making 2 different distinctions, one between the setback and then 2 between the types of materials. So for a standard lot with a building setback that's less than 100 feet, and they basically were keeping the existing standard, and that would permit a monument sign, a metal cabinet on top of a brick or stone base. For a building that is setback greater than 100 feet, they would be allowed to increase that size to 10 feet in height and 60 square feet in area. And then for the less than 100 foot setback, But if they built the sign entirely out of brick, stone, wood, or similar material, they'd be allowed an additional 2 feet in height, so they could go up to 8 feet in height with a maximum area of 24 square feet. And then again, if it's set back greater than 100 feet, they can go up to 12 feet with a maximum area of 60 square feet. So it's the same square footage, but it's a little bit taller. We did change that a little bit based on the conversation that we had at the last meeting. I know there was some thought that maybe the signs were a little bit too tall. I think the top height in the last version was 16 feet. So we changed that down to 12. So again, that's a similar approach. I sent out, at the request of the Plan Commission, I sent out an illustrative report on existing signs, and I can pull that up if anybody wants to look at it.
Tom, you did say that includes everything, the base and everything, right? So the height from the ground up is 12 feet, basically.
That's right. Yep.
Does it matter if there's a provision, whether it's a multi-tenant versus single tenant user?
No, we did not. We didn't add that in any way because, to be honest with you, we didn't think that that was necessarily a meaningful thing. Like just because you have more tenants, you need to have them all listed on the sign. I don't know if this. Can everybody see this sign? This Town of Munster signage?
Yeah.
When you're leasing up that kind of a development.
I can see it from my house in Cobblestone.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is beyond what would be permitted, but that was approved through a variance. This is about what the type of sign that would be permitted would be under this new ordinance. And this is 8 feet tall and 51.5 square feet. So it would be a little bit less than the maximum of 60 square feet, but it would hit the maximum height. That would be 8 feet.
But that would have to be all concrete or all brick, right? To meet the 8-foot height down.
Let's take a look here.
Hey, Tom, will the letters also be like a channel letter on those signs? So it's not just the Lexon slide panel that slides in and out?
Yeah, so that's covered under a different standard, which requires that even when you have a metal cabinet, the face of the cabinet has to be rounded metal. So you can't have, just a plastic translucent face where the entire thing glows at night. You have to have essentially individual letters illuminated. So that would be similar to that.
So that has changed from our last ordinance.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is not a bad sign, really. I mean, we think this is probably one of the better examples of these types of cabinets. It has individual, it's called push-through acrylic letters, a metal cabinet, a nice substantial stone base.
But I'm sorry, Tom, but going back to that one, what we're proposing here is building setback less than 100 feet with brick, stone, wood, or similar materials. So this doesn't, is that community health professional center, that's not made with, or is that one, that's that type of sign, right? That's metal and brick. So that fits in that better category?
No, this is the standard category.
Standard category.
Yeah.
So what in front of us is only 6 foot high, that's 8 foot high, and only 18 square feet, and that's 51 square feet.
Well, this is actually, this would be permitted under that greater than 100-foot tier because that building is set back so far from the road.
Okay.
So there was a petitioner here last meeting, and it was for that wooden sign, that dilapidated wooden sign that they wanted to replace, and they wanted it much larger. Now, that one, when I look at that, that is next to a very large parking lot. But the little wooden sign that is in that location they were discussing.
Yeah.
It's next to a hedge. If you let them put a much larger one, which this would allow, like right now, you can't, you don't even notice it. Now, I'm sure they want you to notice it, but I don't think anybody's not been able to find Compton and Broomhead Dentistry, which is right behind. You know what I'm saying? So, and plus, those are all the way around that property. So as those wooden signs, it's gonna be the next one. And all of a sudden, we're gonna have large sign on every single corner going around. And then we're gonna really notice them. And right now we don't. So in this meeting, we're already at 2 hours and we haven't addressed some of the issues.
Well, we're nearly done. But yeah.
I know, but personally, I think there's too much. I don't want to open the door for monument signs to grow and people sneak in and get the bigger ones right now without more discussion and looking and comparing. I mean, the other two things within the sign category, they're fine because they tighten it up a little bit. But this one, I don't want to not pass a favorable recommendation for everything we've talked about because of this, but that's going to probably stop me. So I just put that out there.
Tom, have we looked, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, Tom, have we looked at how many lots are less than 100 or how many, really it's basically how many lots are farther than 100 foot back? I mean, I probably haven't surveyed enough to see. Probably community hospital is one of them. That's such a huge parcel of land anyways. I mean, is there any really small buildings that would fit in a greater than 100 foot that might have a sign that's really big and a business that's really small?
Not really. Really, those 100-foot setbacks are, like you said, it's some of those office buildings on Calumet Avenue by Community Hospital. And then it's pretty much along 45th Street. That's where you really have those 100-foot setbacks. Anywhere on Ridge Road, really, or North Calumet, everything's pretty much closer to the street. So you wouldn't really get to that, 10-foot setback or 10-foot height. But again, I think one of the things that we had done, and if you want to table this one or move on without this one, that's fine with me. I don't, I'm not emotionally connected to it, but certain things where we thought, well, this is a very tall sign, right? 12 and a half feet, 60 square feet. It is really tall when you think about it in the abstract, but when you're driving along 45th Street, at least from my perspective, it doesn't appear to me to be out of context in terms of the height. It seems to me that is a size that makes sense in that corridor with the existing buildings. All of these things, again, this is 8 feet. That doesn't really seem like a very tall sign to me.
No,
but
that one's not bad.
But again, something like this is huge, right? And those would not be permitted. Here's another example. This one is right at the corner of 45th and Calumet Avenue. That's 8 feet tall. Does it seem like and it's 60 square feet. Does it seem too tall? Personally, no, I don't think it does.
That's not obtrusive.
And that's kind of why we wanted to really just make the ordinance a little bit more in keeping with what we have in town, which we thought were pretty good examples.
But isn't that Franciscan on 45th? That setback is that actually a little bit more than 100 feet?
Yeah, that probably is.
So I would almost venture to say that we don't need to go higher than 8 feet in some of these situations. And again, I think the other one on Community Hospital, the cardiologists that are on 45th, I think that's a good looking sign. And that by these ordinances, it could be higher or taller. I'm thinking that's a pretty good sign.
Yeah.
And I would almost say that we don't want to go higher. And if the setback, and I'm looking through some of the stuff, and I'm not sure if I'm getting the setbacks correct, from a technical standpoint.
Yeah.
But I would almost say that if we're gonna use 100 foot, I would almost say 150 or 200 feet to get to those heights. So we make sure that those buildings are farther back. I think there's a little bit more. I'd like to see some more examples, a little bit of how some of these current signs are actually working, in town. Just because I do think it's a big enough issue that we don't want to go through this 2 months from now.
Yeah, and to build on Councilor Mellon's point, the other ordinances do something to sort of limit or restrict the current. And in this case, for less than 100 feet, we're actually allowing signs to grow by 33% if they use the materials that are desirable. And the current signs aren't restricted at all.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from the commission is there's not as much of a concern about the overall area of the sign, but more the height appears to be really the concern. I think we want signs that are maybe not that tall, right? So they're more sort of, is that?
What about just having a certain size and height for all of the properties along 45th between the town line and, White Oak?
Yeah,
Just
we
set
could
the
do that,
standard
too.
that way and be done.
We could do that. We haven't done that study. I mean, we have to study it.
We do.
So I'm fine with, we want to, so right now we've got the lighting, which we're taking off the table. But I think the monument sign, it sounds like there's still some, maybe not full enthusiasm for what we're proposing here. So I'm fine with that. I think if we just want to strike that one and we'll come back to it at some point. There's nobody except for Dr. Kufis waiting for a monument sign, but he was going to make one under the old standard anyway. So I think we're fine with that.
Yeah, if we would not adopt the monument sign, we just would not be increasing what could be created. So I think we can come back to that later with no adverse effects.
Okay. All right. So I think this is the second to last one here. Oh, maybe not quite. It's okay. We'll get through it.
Here to help.
All right. So we talked about this at the last one, fences on corner lots. I'll just show you. I've got an illustration here. This is what we currently permit. Sorry.
Or fences.
Say you have a house, you're on a corner lot. This represents the street here. This is your property line. This is a very common occurrence in Munster in certain parts. Your front yard is technically here. This is your front door, but your front yard is also here because it faces the street. Your rear yard is from the plane of your rear of your house to the back of the rear of your house. So it begins here and here. You have a very small rear yard. What you could do, if you wanted to, you could fence in a portion of your yard, which is the side yard, under the current code. That's where your fence would have to be if you wanted to have a fence. Under the old ordinance, and what we're proposing to do in the revision tonight is to change this back to permitting a portion of the front yard to be treated as if it were a side yard and to be fenced in. So there's a fence, what could be considered under the old understanding to be the front yard could now be fenced in. And then with a couple caveats. One, there has to be a site triangle preserved between a driveway and the property line. So there's 10 feet measured here and 10 feet measured here, and then a line drawn between them. And that's where the fence has to get sort of, the corner has to get cut off. So if you're pulling out of your driveway and there's somebody standing on the sidewalk, maybe right here, you will see them and not run them over. And the other thing is that the fence has to be 3 feet off the property line. So you can't go all the way up to the sidewalk. You have to be 3 feet setback from the sidewalk. And then based on the conversation that was had, at the last plan commission meeting, I've also added a provision that says that it cannot be chain link. So that was something that members of the planning commission suggested, and that's something that's now incorporated. So now what we're proposing is we're essentially saying that, to summarize what I just said, the front yard fence standard shall apply to the shorter street side of the lot. Side yard fence standard shall apply to the longer street side of the lot, irrespective of the orientation of the residence. So it doesn't matter where your front door is, subject to the following exceptions. One, and this was taken from the old code, when the zoning administrator determines that allowing a fence on a corner lot will hamper traffic visibility and public safety, or be detrimental to the aesthetic qualities or property value of neighboring properties. The front yard standard shall apply to both frontages. 2, there's that triangular vision clearance vision triangle. And then 3, the fence has to be set back a minimum of 3 feet, and then 4, chain link is prohibited material. So again, this is something that we talked about quite a bit at the last meeting. I think that given the historic pattern of permitting these fences in the town and really not having any issues with any of them, and there's a desire from, I know, current residents to do something like this, we're strongly recommending that we make this change and change it to the way it was in the past.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Tom, what if I put a open air, like a wrought iron type fence or aluminum picket style fence where you could see through every 4 inches? Can I put my fence up to the sidewalk then? Because I could see through there?
Or if it's 3 feet tall.
Huh?
Or if it's 3 feet tall.
What's that?
Or if it's 3 feet tall, he said.
Well, what if, I'm a
So
corner lot.
if it's a landscape fence and it's not 6 feet tall and you can't see through.
No, I'm saying, what if I'm a corner lot, okay, and I got my sidewalk that's 10 feet off the thing, and I don't want to lose 3 foot of backyard, and I put a wrought iron fence up that I could see through. It's open air. Can I put it up to the sidewalk?
Not with this, not with what you're proposing right now.
I wouldn't support this then. I wouldn't want to lose 3 feet of back if I put an open air fence.
Well, what do you think about putting the fence all the way up to the sidewalk like that? Go back to that picture, please.
There's fences up here on the sidewalk and cobblestones.
Well, past members used to always say, just because you make a mistake once doesn't mean.
Well, like I said, what if I put arborvitae's all the way down there, Bill? You still can't see down there.
No, you couldn't do that. Because
Why can't I? I could put arborvitae's down my sidewalk on my property.
I disagree.
You could. We don't have any shrub standards.
Right.
I mean, that would make it a fence then. I would call it a fence. I could have a living fence, because I'm sure your thing doesn't have a definition of what a fence is. I just call my attorney over here and he can punch a bunch of holes in it.
Now, if you have a gap every so often, it's not truly a living
The
fence.
3 foot off the sidewalk strictly for vision, or is it for giving some extra space to a sidewalk? Kid riding a bike and there's 2 kids riding bikes back and forth.
It's pretty much for the latter. It's just so that you're not right up on the sidewalk, so that there's a little bit of space for maintenance and just to have.
I'd give you a foot, but I wouldn't want to lose 3 feet along a property line.
I'm sorry, what, Roland?
I said I'd give maybe a foot off the sidewalk as a little buffer. You know what I mean? But especially there's a difference between a privacy fence that's completely a solid stockade type fence and an open air fence, so you could see in between, especially for safety and sight lines and stuff.
For a privacy fence, give it 3 feet. For any a visual fence that you can see through, go up to a foot or go up to the sidewalk line.
You could see through it. It's open air, So I mean, so if you're losing, property, if you put a pool in or anything else, then then maybe you look at trying to have a, you know, a bigger backyard.
Roland, are you talking about a 6-foot fence?
Sure, 6 foot, 5 foot, 3 foot, whatever it is.
6-foot fence is where you're gonna have your sightline issue.
I'll tell you what, I
So you-
mean, if that's what it takes to get this passed, I will,
Yeah, no,
I will support it.
I can see the visibility of a 6-foot fence, and having that come off 3 foot, I think does help the visibility along with the triangular approach.
Yeah.
Again, see-through fence, you know, picket fence is 3 foot high.
I'll just say that if we add that transparency provision in there, then there's gonna be some subjectivity because it would be probably the chief building inspector determining whether or not it's transparent enough. So I think we can do that. Then yeah, we can come up with some language for that. That would permit it if that's what.
Or just slats, just like you do on a porch. There's a guideline on, if you have a 2nd-story porch, on how that fence, because of the amount of slat, the distance on that, you can do something like that too.
I think we can come up with something like that in between now and the town council meeting.
Yeah.
That's the desire of the planning commission.
Mr. Chairman, how many of these lots like this do we have in town, roughly? Is it 2, 3, 5, 15, 50?
I would say it's probably between, I mean, this is just a guess, but it's probably more like 25. I would say.
I mean, what are you getting at, Brian? I mean, having the fence go to the sidewalk just in general on a quarter lot?
I mean, the ones where it's basically a corner lot like this. I mean, I wouldn't have guessed that they were meant in cobblestone that, you know, Roland has one. I would have thought they would have been more like on the older, you know, on the older side of town. But I guess, you know, they're more prevalent than what I would have expected, I guess. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably 5 or 6 fence applications in our office right now to do just this. So it's not, I mean, this is really not something that we initiated. We didn't think it would be an issue either, but as we, you know, as we started denying applications, we realized that it was a pretty pervasive issue throughout
Well,
town.
I mean,
So,
well, I mean, you're defining as having 2 front yards, basically. You know what I mean? I guess there's probably less. I'm looking at it. Okay, are you going to restrict every corner lot in town to be able to put a fence up to the sidewalk? Because I have a side loaded driveway, you know, that's, you know, and then you got the, you know, you can put a fence like close to the property line, you know?
I have that set up as well.
yeah, so Roland, really what it is the thing that changes it is having the front door on this side of the house.
Right.
I mean, if your front door was here, you could put a fence out like this. I mean, you could already do it. It's just because of the orientation of the house. And that's really all this does is it changes the rule to allow some flexibility when your door is on the wrong side of the house, you know, on the wrong side of the house.
So that change, this I like better because if you go the fence all the way on this kind of orientation, all the way to the sidewalk, that changes the aesthetic of the street.
Yes.
Because now you're not looking at houses down the street with the landscaping. Now you have it broken up by a big old fence that, you know, is what it is. Whether it's white or pink or whatever color everybody likes, it is what it is.
It won't be chain link.
It won't be chain link.
Well,
Which could be nice too if you do it correctly.
Like I said, this definitely needs to be tweaked, but I think you should look at, obviously, if it's an open air ornamental fence that, you know, and maybe keep it 5 feet or less or something, you know, or 4 feet. But I mean, I think you should look at it different than a privacy stockade fence, you know?
But see, it's with the front door, and that's the orientation. I mean, with the front door, your front yard is where your front door is. Now you can call it whatever you want, but that's where.
I think we already, didn't we give a variance for this, or didn't it come up on Ridge Road already for a person wanting to put a dog fence in, Tom?
That was just in the side yard.
Okay.
So originally the fence ordinance prohibited 6-foot fences even in the side yard. So we changed that already. Now we're changing it back even farther to permit it in this unique circumstance.
Front yard.
And in this diagram, there's a lot of a situation where the house and the garage are connected. And what it is the fence is on the other side of the garage that meets up with the other fence. And I can tell you, there's probably 3 houses that, where the fences then will connect the 2 side lots together. And they're both facing that main street. So in this diagram, the fence would be kind of really stand out, but most of the time that garage is to the house, it's connected, and then the fence is on the outside of the property.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, if it was an attached garage, then it would be sort of like the entire backyard.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, I think from an aesthetic standpoint, is it the ideal situation? I don't know. But from a practical standpoint, I think just the fact that we have a significant number of these already, it hasn't been an issue from my perspective or to my knowledge. And there's a pretty strong desire from some of these residents to have this, which I think is understandable given the lack of a rear yard that these houses have. I mean, they don't have a real opportunity to do the things that people like to do in the backyard, right? Like play catch and throw a ball for their dog and things like that. I just think that this is a way that we can provide this opportunity for people.
And Tom, what's the issue with in the limited instances where they want this to happen, going before the BZA to get approval?
Well, I think
so once we put this in the code, it could be, theoretically, there's 4 of these on every block.
Yeah, I think it's there is a limited application because it's not every corner house that's like this. But I guess my biggest reservation about telling people to get a variance for this type of situation is that it kind of dilutes the meaning of a variance, because when you're presenting your case for a variance, you have to prove that you have a difficulty complying with the zoning ordinance. And I think it would be very difficult to prove that you need a fence in your
front yard
or side yard or whatever. I mean, you could say that I really want it and I don't have an opportunity to, have a private yard, but I don't know if that rises to the level of you are unable or you're finding it very difficult to actually comply with the zoning code, because the easiest way to comply would be just to not put up a fence. You're not being forced in any way to put up a fence.
And when you bought the house, you knew what you were
Exactly.
doing.
Yeah.
I bought the house and I couldn't get a basketball court. I don't care what I do, I just don't have one. Could you put another fence where it says front yard? I don't agree with that being the front yard. Can you put a fence there?
No.
Why not?
Because the front yard standards would apply to that area.
But I thought the front yard is where your front door is.
Well, under normal circumstances, but this changes it so that you can treat the front yard like a side yard. That's what the ordinance does.
So the ordinance is really about changing what a front yard is.
It's
Right.
treating it like a side yard, yes.
So if you go back to the previous slide, you could, in this case, I guess where it says front yard at the bottom, it ought to say side yard. So you could put the fence also at the bottom.
A corner side yard, yeah. Possibly, but again, you have to just look at it from the perspective of the homeowner, and the bulk of their yard is located in that area on this image to the north of the house. And it makes sense. And, I think, for lack of a better way to say it, the vision of many of these people when they move in is that, yeah, I don't really have a backyard, but this is my backyard, and I'll use it like a backyard, and I'll fence it in like a backyard, and then, you know, in the old, and then they see the neighbor next door, and then there's another neighbor 2 blocks down that did that, and they think, oh, great, I'm gonna do this too. And then they come in and we tell them, well, the rule changed and you can't do that anymore. It's,
Mr. Chairman, I like that we're going back to the old code. I do understand that there's concerns about safety, that we do ensure that triangular area, if we're looking at it. I don't have a problem with the privacy or the visibility. If we want to move that back 3 feet for that type of fence, a solid wood fence or a solid plastic fence. And if we need to extend more area for a fence that you could see through, I'm fine with that. But I do think going back to the old code is important to do.
Old code being what I'm looking at here, Councilman?
Not this one, that
Proposed code, this is
proposed, the proposed code that was the previous code back in 2019.
Tom, and I'm okay if the front yard's back 3 foot, but the side yards and the rear yards, I like to see, you know, the fence if possible to be closer to property lines.
okay,
The
yeah, I
front-
mean, this wouldn't apply, everything here doesn't apply in a situation where your door is on the other side of the building.
Right.
So just, I wouldn't conflate those two standards.
It's really the site, it's the driveway that we're concerned with, right? When the fence is attached or next to the driveway, that's what we're concerned with.
That's the safety issue.
Yeah.
The 3 foot thing that was part of it too. I mean, it hasn't always been adhered to, but that's part of the rule, so.
Yeah.
I just think it doesn't look right.
Well, you don't observe it from the air.
No, but I drive down the street and there's a big white fence right in the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have to see
I
it.
would call this one a compromise.
And so why would we put
Or shall we-
Why would we want to put a compromise in the code?
I think because there's conflicting values here.
See, Mr. Baker, that's why I like an open air, because you don't have the feeling of things being locked up and looking like a stockade fence as you're driving down Ridge Road or something.
But it's personal preference. It's just like the signage thing we just talked about. You know, you're not going to be able to tell them only put up this kind of fence. They want a white plastic fence.
I'll just say that if this wasn't already well established in the community, I don't think we would be considering making this change. I think it's only because it's already been established. It's
25 houses.
No, I would say you can go down Broadmoor, you can go down White Oak Avenue, and you'd see 15 just down those 2 streets. Then you can go to the rest of the town. And I would say it's upwards 75 to 100 houses that have fences on the corners when you really look at it.
And I'm in favor of allowing the residents who don't have backyards. I mean, like we talked about, they envision they want to be able to keep their dog in and not be run over, or their children or whatever. So while it might not be ideal, I think that it's something that we should consider allowing personally.
Mr. Chairman, shall we proceed or?
Let's go. Please.
Okay. We've only got a few left here. So the next significant amendment is for building materials. Again, we talked about this at the last meeting. Didn't hear any real suggestions to change it, but we're basically just proposing that we add a few more different materials to the list of permitted materials, because currently it's pretty restricted, just brick or natural stone. So there's other things that we might want to have on buildings, which are just as good and just as high quality. And then we're specifically prohibiting a few different things. So aluminum siding, metal, industrial siding, vinyl siding, asphalt siding, EFS, cedar shakes, concrete masonry units, or plywood siding. These are building material standards that only apply CD4A, CD4B, and CD5. The error in the attached list did not show that change for CD5. So that's what we would want to do. And I think it also kind of provides some clarity about prohibiting materials. So even though we're allowing metal, for example, as an accent, we're not allowing industrial siding as an accent.
Tom, would you want to list the metal as architectural metal panels? Like ACM panels?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably other applications in metal besides that we might want to permit. I think the other thing is that anytime a building like this comes up and gets developed, this would go to the planning commission for approval. So we would have an opportunity to review all these materials. But I think this is just a good starting point.
Development plan?
Yeah, for a development plan. Because anytime you make a change to a commercial building, change the facade, it has to come to the planning commission. So I think we'll have an opportunity to review this. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think that there are certain times when the accent material would be like more than just the architectural metal.
I mean, I have a building that's at accent, has EFS, and then you put your channel signs on. And it's a box that's what you put it on because it's easier to take care of as opposed to drilling holes into the brick.
I know, I don't think that's what the planning commission wants.
I'm just saying, that's how the rest of the world is, but that's another option in looking at how an accent is different from a full building. When I have an EFS house, I would suggest it to anybody.
Yeah. Well, that's all the prohibited materials would be prohibited even as that.
Roland, what's that kind of vinyl siding? It's not vinyl anymore, it's concrete mason. What is that stuff called?
Well, that's more residential that you see for like the lap siding.
Yeah, but there's a terminology for it.
There's cement board. There's cement boards, Bill.
Yeah. So I mean,
Well, that's more for residential, the 1x8s and stuff like that. You know.
You know, if you're not going to let EFS and go in for some of these places on a commercial building, then cement board would be another option.
Well, like I said, I think Tom said, this is a good start, and at least we can pick apart when the plans come in front of the commission.
So here's the other thing, and that's kind of why we added that phrase, similar materials approved by the planning commission for the accent materials. I think if somebody came up with something that is not on the list, but it accomplishes the same thing in terms of aesthetic quality and durability that I think the planning commission has always required, then I think that would be an opportunity for the planning commission to approve it.
Yeah, you had that flexibility.
That would be my suggestion.
Can we put that in primary too then? I mean, what's a terracotta building? Where's a terracotta building?
You would see those downtown Chicago, the old brick and masonry where you got terracotta, stone, and stuff like that.
Yeah, but nobody does that anymore, Roland.
No, but if you wanted to throw a retro building up, you could use around the windows or accents.
$900 a foot, you could do it.
I'm just saying, we're not ruling it out.
Oh, okay. That would be under similar materials.
It would cost you a fortune.
If Roland wanted to move the Wrigley building to Munster.
Right.
Anything else? Is there anything else on that one? Are we good, generally good with that, as long as we have that plan commission release valve in there?
Yes.
Is the release valve only for the accent materials?
Yeah.
That's how, well, then I'd say put it on the primary too.
You can list both of it. Or, well, you know it's prohibited already.
Okay. We'll do that.
Yeah, because the terracotta and the ceramic tile buildings are prevalent.
Maybe as a storefront. Okay, so again, this is a significant amendment, but I don't think it's very controversial. We have currently a definition of smoke, tobacco, or CBD shop in our code that says it's defined as any establishment in which greater than 10% of the floor area is devoted to display, sales, or storage of tobacco, vaping, or cannabis oil products. We're proposing that we change that definition to be 5% of floor area. And what that will do is it will restrict convenience stores and other types of stores from beginning to sell these types of products. The concern is that, you know, people will come in saying they're gonna have a convenience store, which has actually already happened, and then they want to become a tobacco shop. And it's just, you know, it's just making it more restrictive, and it's really prohibiting some of these, you know, incognito tobacco stores from coming in. Existing stores are still permitted, and it would be subject, any new place would just be subject to the distance requirements that we have in the code, which basically establishes the radius around existing tobacco shops and churches, schools, parks, and other places where children regularly gather. So it kind of freezes Munster in place as far as the number of smoke shops. So I think this is a good change to make.
Yeah.
Tom, I completely agree. I'm just wondering if that 5%, I know because tobacco products are rather small, and in gas stations, you know, they'll be along the wall. Have you calculated, like looked at an average size building, like one of the smaller ones, like where you said that convenience store went in?
Yeah.
Would they, I mean, I would propose 0.0001% if I could. You know what I'm saying? I just want to make, because they're always looking for loopholes to
I
put in another shop.
When we came up with the 10% number, we actually had conversations with some gas station owners, and they said that would be like, that's like typical for a gas station, it's like 10%. When the Ridge Quick Mart came in, we went and measured, and they were like right at 10%. So we think that if we went down to 5%, we would really make it difficult to do. I mean, you could still sell tobacco, right? But it would be very, very limited. You couldn't build your business on it, which I think was what they were attempting to do.
Can we state that the ceiling is considered the 5th floor? Because I can see them hanging them from.
Oh, we would count that.
Okay.
We would count that.
I'm not really trying to be funny. I'm just trying to think of all the tricks in my tool.
I think we've been very successful. I mean, yeah, some things have slipped through, but generally speaking, I mean, we've turned down double-digit number of smoke shops based on this ordinance, so it's been working pretty well.
Good.
That's the last one here. Okay, so the final thing is that we talked about it in the last meeting. We're proposing to change the legal non-conforming buildings, structures, and sign provisions. This is in all districts. Currently, we say that building structures and signs may not be substantially modified, altered, enlarged, increased, or extended to occupy more land. And what we're proposing to change is to permit these things to happen if it decreases the nonconformity and if the modification or alteration is in conformity with the relevant standards of the article. So any change that's made has to comply with the code for both buildings and signs. The one exception is with a pole sign. We are going to maintain a strict prohibition against any changes to a pole sign with the intent of eliminating them from town. But again, what this will do is it'll just allow existing businesses which are, or existing buildings which don't conform, they can still make changes to their buildings. They can get incrementally better, more close to full compliance without having every time they want to do that go through the onerous process of getting a variance. Because that has happened quite a bit. And I think the members before zoning appeals will remember we had a number last year of buildings that were hoping to improve, and then we just added 2 months to their process and public hearing and everything, just to do things that we wanted them to do anyway. And they were approved to do so, but they had to get a variance to do it, so. We think this is, again, provides flexibility for redevelopment and allows for incremental improvement. And I'll just say that our attorney, David Workman, did review this and finds this to be a perfectly legal approach.
To the best of his knowledge.
Mr. Chairman, one question.
Yes, sir.
So it says in the current that it can't be extended to occupy more land. It would need to be brought up to code. It's unclear in the proposed if that would be maintained. So if the building is extended, will it need to become a conforming building?
No, because I would consider that to be a substantial modification or alteration. So I think that would, yeah, I mean, I think that would still be permitted under this proposed exception.
So as I read it, currently, if you make basically any significant change, you need to bring the whole building up to code. In the proposed, we don't want to make it so onerous. If the things you're changing are now up to code, that's fine. But then this extension to occupy more land seems like that wouldn't be a change that necessarily brings it up to code. Do you know what I mean?
Not necessarily, yeah.
So if the building's getting made bigger, seems like it might make sense to then need to bring the whole building up to code. But I'm in support of all these other significant changes that are meeting the new code.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think we're looking at it in the sense of, you know, imagine you had an existing building and you say it was a Relios and they wanted to put an addition on the back of the building. Right, so it would be extended to occupy more land. The building is legal non-conforming, but the modification is not, you know, the alteration would be in conformity with the code. So do they get a variance so that they can extend it to occupy more land? I don't know. I think it's fine because it's not increasing the non-conformity. And the fact that the alteration does conform with the code means that it's actually increasing it's increasing its conformity in some sense.
How can you increase conformity?
Easily.
Really?
It's required.
If it conforms, it conforms.
But if it doesn't conform, you can increase its or decrease its non-conformity ratio.
Okay.
Maybe you.
Can I open this up to a public hearing?
Yeah. Only public left.
I don't know. I can't see the Zoom people.
Check the. Oh.
So I'm opening it up to public hearing once, twice.
Well, let me see. I see somebody on the Zoom. AC. My hunch is that it's Alan Chase.
Yes.
Alan, there's a public hearing.
Yep, I'm still on. Good afternoon, commission, and thank you, everyone. No comments. The only comment I would have would be toward the corner lot fencing. Say your main door is on the south of your proposed building and not on the long end. There's very little restrictions for your fencing. Really, it's just the unfortunate occurrence of where your front door lies that, you know, hems you in. So really, that was the only comments I had, just to be, you know, clarify the homes with the door on the long dimension to be treated similarly to the homes where the door is on the short dimension. Because if you look down the whole street, there's many homes with the door on the short dimension where the fence is allowed to go as far as it would like. But if your front door is not there, then, you know, it just didn't get captured. So that was it.
Okay, anybody else? Going once, going twice? No more public involvement, unfortunately. All right, we have a huge presentation. Next on the agenda to do something about it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to forward to the town council a favorable recommendation to provide or to approve the zoning text amendments presented under PC docket number 21-002 minus section 26-6, I believe, for the lighting types.
Sure.
And the section under signs that dealt specifically with the monument sign changes.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
And a second discussion. I can't see anybody, so I can't. Let me do this. Any discussion? Once?
Yeah, I would
What?
just say, sorry, I'll just make one comment. I think
Okay.
I'm in support of everything we talked about. I'm just not fully supporting the front yard, side yard fencing. So wanted to make that note in my vote, since we're considering that as well today.
Thank you. Anyone else? Either now we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, Tom.
Councilor Mellon,
Yes.
Councilor Gardner,
Yes.
Councilor Tulowitzki,
No.
Stuart Freeman,
Yes.
Roland Raffin,
Yes.
Brian Specht,
Yes.
Chairman Baker.
Yes.
Your motion carries.
Okay, next up, findings of fact, PC 21-002 about zoning code text amendments. I don't know what happened there. What's going on? Oh, we're just gonna approve it now. That's a joke.
I was gonna say, well.
Mr. Chairman, can we go over it from the top again?
Yeah, can we start over? Can you go back to slide number 1?
You don't enjoy this as much as I do?
I do. I mean, I'm way past my bedtime. I love staying up late.
Okay, the only thing that I would mention is that because there were some changes to the motion, does that require some changes to the findings of fact?
Oh, absolutely, but, you know, you're gonna attach exhibit A, we can get together tomorrow or the next day and make the same
Okay,
change.
yeah. So
Make
we
the
just
same change.
reference in exhibit A. Okay,
Exhibit A will be attached to findings
so the findings could be approved as
tonight.
presented.
And that's presented.
Parallel this motion, same thing.
Okay, so somebody needs to make a motion what Dave just said.
Then I will make a motion to accept the finding of facts for favorable recommendation to the town council to adopt several amendments to the zoning ordinance for the town of Munster, excluding 26-2 regarding lighting and excluding the monument sign discussion.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I will second that motion.
And there's a second approval for the findings of fact. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Councilman?
No, I'm okay with the findings of fact.
Okay. All right, anybody else have any other business, additional items?
Some development updates?
Huh?
You want development updates?
No. At 10:30?
Exactly.
Thank you, though. All right, next meeting is scheduled for May 11th, 2021. Thank you for the participation, everybody, making our town better. Motion to adjourn, anyone?
Don't move.
Second.
I'll second.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
All right.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you all for getting through that.
Tom, I would love your development, like, email them.
I don't have any prepared, but.
Oh, okay, I
I'll send you
thought.